right, well, it's a little bit after 6, or depending on what clock you look at up there. So we will call the Budget Committee meeting to order for the day of May 13th, 2024. And we will do a roll call. Looks like all members of the Budget Committee are here with the exception of Mr. Walker. But do we need introductions, or are we good? You know what, let's do introductions. Melanie, why don't you start? Just so everyone knows who you are.
Oh, okay. I'm Melanie Rava. I am, what is my title? Office Specialist, Confidential. I've been working with the city since November.
Awesome, thank you. Alyssa?
I'm Alyssa Angelo. I'm the Assistant City Manager.
I'm Julia Hyduk. I'm the City Manager.
James Brand, the Finance Director.
David Giulio, City Councilor and Budget Committee Member.
Luke Cranston, Citizen Member.
Damian Santani, retired Safeway truck driver, Budget Committee Member.
Thank you. Brian Quigley, Mayor.
Leonard Hayes, Citizen, retired.
Ben McDonald, City Councilor.
Jordan Ort, City Councilor.
Jonathan Penrice, Citizen Member of the Budget Committee.
David Patty, City Councilor.
Steve Sims, City Councilor.
Denise Bush, Budget Citizen Member.
Thank you. Staff in the back. Lance, want to go?
Lance Ludwig, Director of Public Works.
Jennifer Siciliano, Community and Economic Development Director. Janet Musher, Library Director. Gwen Johns, Chief of Police.
Awesome. Go ahead.
And if I could just make a note, certainly the councilors introduce themselves as councilors. Just as a reminder, for this meeting, you're all Budget Committee members. So while their role is councilor, they're Budget Committee members, so you can refer to them accordingly.
Thank you. Mr. Walker just joined us. All right. Well, the first order of business for tonight will be to do the election of a chair and a vice chair. So with that, I'd like to receive some motions for the chair of the Budget Committee to start with.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Councilor Giulio, or committee member Giulio.
I would like to move, I would like to continue the tradition that seems to have been here, at least I've only been here 1 year, but the one you had last year, that we have a citizen member as the chair of the committee. And just considering his experience, yeah, just I think he'd be a fantastic chairman. I wanted to nominate Damian Centanati. I'm sorry,
Okay, Santani.
Centani, I'm so sorry. Damian Centani as the chairman. I think he would do a phenomenal job leading this committee.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I might have to have a comment.
You second? Do we second?
So,
Just in case I'm absent tomorrow, I'd be happy to take that role on, but if I'm absent tomorrow, then I wouldn't be playing that role, so Wednesday. I'll leave that up to you guys.
Yep. Wednesday.
Yep, that's why we have a vice chair, so you'll be covered.
Okay.
Absolutely. Councilor Ort, did you have something?
Do we need a second?
I believe so.
So I think he has to accept the nomination, and then I guess I just want to, you are not going to be here on Wednesday, is that correct? Or is that still questionable?
13, 15, 16 are the 3 days, right?
Correct.
Wednesday, not.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I messed up. Did I say tomorrow?
Yeah.
I meant to say Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that folks knew that he has a conflict and will not be here on Wednesday.
So if that's okay with all you folks, I already had a prior engagement from a few months ago planned for Wednesday the 15th.
So are you accepting the nomination? Is that
I
what
will
you're doing?
accept if everybody's okay with me being absent on Wednesday, yeah.
All right. Anybody else have a discussion or a second or another nomination?
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and second to have Damian Centani be the chair of the Budget Committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Looks like motion carries unanimous. I don't know how many that is. 12? 12-0. That leaves us with the next most important role, the vice chair of the Budget Committee. Don't all speak up at once.
are you, who are you? Are you the chairman right now? How do I?
Yeah, I guess at the moment. 'Cause it's-
Mayor Quigley.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to elect Denise Bush as our vice president, or vice chair.
Denise, what do you think?
I've never done it.
It's okay.
Nothing to it.
I'll watch Damien.
It's the first time for everything.
Okay, she accepted the nomination. Any other further discussion?
I think you need a second.
I did have a second. I thought, didn't I? Oh, maybe I didn't. You're right. Thank you. I didn't have a second.
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to appoint Denise Bush as the vice chair of the Budget Committee. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous. All right, that leaves us
Right,
to...
wait, now you are no longer the chair.
That's right. Now I yield my temporary duty as the chair to Mr. Santani. Mr. Santani, take it over.
Okay, and I don't remember too much from last year because that was my first year of my 3-year stint here, so I was just handed this opening statement.
So, yeah, so first on the agenda, the next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
So I'm starting with this.
Right here, approval of motions, yep. Approval of minutes from the May 24th, 2023 budget.
Okay, so I'll ask you all to vote on approval of the minutes from the May 24th, 2023 Budget Committee meeting. We need a motion to approve the minutes from the May 24th Budget Committee meeting as presented or as amended.
Chair Santani, this is Councilor McDonald. I will motion to approve the minutes from the May 24th, 2023 Budget Committee meeting.
I'll
as
second.
presented.
Good to go.
Okay, and the minutes from last year have been accepted.
And now they need to,
Now we have to vote on it.
Oh,
yeah, he's guiding you.
All those in favor say aye to accept.
Aye.
Any rejections? No. So the motion passes.
If I may, Chair, I would suggest, just because there's so many people here and so many people that are not used to Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure, I would recommend that if people want to speak through the course of the meeting, that you raise your placard like this, and that will be assigned to you, that people want to speak, and then you can call on them.
Okay.
So that might help make things flow a little bit better.
Okay. Thank you for that, Julia. So am I just going down through this?
You're good, sir. Public comment.
Okay. Okay, so now we're at the public comment period. Public hearing, proposed use of state shared revenues, i.e. liquor, cigarette tax, gas tax, state shared revenue. Small letter A is opening statement read by the Budget Committee Chair, which is myself, which is what, this?
Yep.
So this is going to tell us a little bit about an Oregon statute. Oregon Revised Statutes 221.770 requires 2 public hearings to be held to hear from citizens regarding the use of state revenue sharing funds distributed to the city of Stayton. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony on the proposed uses of the funds. Before opening the public hearing, we will receive a staff report.
Okay, we'll have the presentation start on the screen soon. But the state revenue share is, there are 5 portions of this. The first 4 are generally deposited into the general fund. So that includes the cigarette tax, liquor tax, marijuana tax, and then state revenue sharing. Those first 4 items in total are about 1% of the general fund budget, and they don't have any restrictions on their use. That's why they're put into the general fund. The 5th item is the state gas tax. and it's a bit more than the rest, and it is designated as must be used for street improvements, so that goes into the street fund. In total, this is $1,053,075 in the proposed budget for fiscal year 25. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next item is open the public hearing on the aforementioned items. Are there any public citizens willing to make any testimony? And are we live on the YouTube and everything else?
We are,
Okay.
yeah, and there's nobody that we've been made aware of that is wanting to testify.
Okay. All right, so the last item on that subset of public hearing is we'll close the public hearing at this point. Next item will be our budget message from our city manager, Julia.
That's me. So as Alyssa is going to do some little technical stuff, but I just wanted to, I've already mentioned the placards that we're proposing to use to kind of help with the conversation. I also wanted to note that we're hoping this evening to go until 9. It'd be wonderful if we get through everything and we're done tonight, but I don't expect that to happen. But if we can get through the presentations, that's our goal, so that we can get questions, so that by Wednesday, we're able to get you responses to your questions. But regardless of whether or not we're done with the presentations, we will plan on sort of pausing about 8:40, 8:45, so that you guys can ask any questions that you have that you want responses to before you deliberate for a decision. Okay, so I'm going to read a budget message. It's similar to what's in the book, but it's not verbatim, so just if you're following along, you won't be able to. It's my pleasure to present to you my proposed budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. This budget has been prepared in alignment with the city's financial policies, Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, guidelines, and in consideration of the council's goals and community needs. We have a lot of wonderful and exciting projects that we're planning to deliver over the next several years, and this budget reflects that. The development of this budget has gone through multiple levels and lenses of review. First, directors prepare a budget based on their department needs, taking into consideration rising costs, council goals, community needs, etc. Then it goes through a series of iterative reviews by me, the city manager, to make sure the budget allocations are vetted, necessary, and make sense. The next review occurs after the budget is finalized in our budget software. We add projections of how the current year will end, which generate beginning fund balances for the new budget. We rebalance the transfers and make sure each fund meets the requirements for contingencies and reserves. At that point, if the expenditures exceed revenues or transfers are higher than acceptable, additional cuts are made. While a lot of thought and work goes into the development of this proposed budget, it is only a staff recommendation. This budget should be examined, considered, discussed, and questioned. Your review and input will improve the quality of the final product. This budget should be the narrative and reflection of the community's values as expressed through the approval of the Budget Committee. As budget requests were reviewed, we carefully looked at projected ending fund balances to ensure what was being proposed was not only balanced for this fiscal year, but was sustainable over future fiscal years. While we do see a reduction in some ending fund balances, most are attributed to one-time costs and not ongoing operational costs. While the budget does see a decline in the unappropriated and contingency in the general fund to 13%, which is half of the 27% in last year's budget, we carefully examined the reasons for this to ensure it is attributed to one-time expenses. The budget before you is a balanced budget, which means that requirements do not exceed the resources. In March 2023, the council met for a full day of goal setting to validate or revise their council goals. In addition to the goals, the council adopted several action items that they would like to see accomplished over a 2-year period. The goals adopted by the council are to improve the city's infrastructure and support maintenance with sustainable funding, align housing policies with the community needs, increase communication, engagement, and transparency, foster a diverse and balanced economy to support a vibrant and prosperous community, and implement modern governance systems that improve service to the community. Each department and fund budget has been prepared with these goals as well as the desired outcomes and objectives in mind. Throughout the budget, whether it is a capital project or a contract services budget, we have planned to make progress on the council's goals and objectives. I want to highlight a few changes in the 24-25 budget compared to last year. We are proposing to add an additional position in Public Works. We have many infrastructure improvement needs and have funding in place for many planned infrastructure projects for the next several years. As a result, this budget proposes to add a civil engineer position in Public Works to ensure we are able to deliver those projects. This position will help Public Works to continue all their existing hard work, including planning for and acquiring funds for infrastructure projects, and aid in the delivery of street improvements and maintenance projects. The proposed budget allocates $750,000 towards rehabilitation and reconstruction projects. $3 million wastewater project funded by a state grant. $1.8 million for a regional stormwater facility funded by federal funds. $250,000 for park improvements at Riverfront Park South and Community Center Park funded through county ARPA funds. $120,000 for safety action planning funded through federal funds. The $5.1 million aquifer storage recovery, or ASR project, which is funded through water funds, and a $3.8 million grant from the Water Resources Department. And we have funding requests for numerous other infrastructure projects. We are also planning a Resource Assistance for Rural Environments, or RARE, intern. We have submitted a proposal for a RARE intern through the RARE program. If we are selected to have an intern through this program, they will help to reevaluate and prioritize economic development strategies as one of their core projects. They will also support the economic growth of the community and assist with grant applications. In the event we are successful, we have allocated $25,000 towards our share of this position, in addition to materials and services to support the housing of the position in the office. This budget also includes an increase in the court budget. The court budget has been increased to allow for our municipal court to hear low-level crime cases rather than have them go to the county. This change would allow more local control and accountability that benefits the community. Finally, I want to mention some transfers from the general fund. We worked hard to keep transfers from the general fund as low as possible to maintain the fund stability. Transfers to the library did not change. The pool transfer decreased slightly from $145,000 to $131,000 this year, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about that transfer when we talk about the pool itself. The final transfer of note is an increase in the general fund transfer to parks from $190,000 to $262,000. The primary contributing factor for this increase was the need to replace a tractor. The new tractor is estimated to be $60,000. This document was the result of a team effort among city staff. I'm not sure thank you is enough when it comes to the hard work that goes into making this document a reality. I want to thank James Brand, our finance director, and Randy Herberger, I never say your name right, Heiberger, our assistant finance director, who spearheaded the budget. Additionally, a huge thanks to your department heads, Lance Ludwig, Jennifer Siciliano, Gwen Johns, Jana Moser, and Assistant City Manager Alyssa Angelo, who all had significant roles in making this budget a reality, as well as Melanie Raba, who helped get the document out the door and put the slideshow together. Finally, I want to thank the governing body for their continued support and encouragement. I also want to note that in your supplemental package, you received our ad packages. This is a new, referred to last year, but we really fleshed it out a lot more this year, where James had a lot more detail and what those costs would entail. That's included in your information. I just wanted to note that. We weren't going to go through those in great detail, but we're happy to answer questions when we're doing each department presentation about those. There were 5 proposed ads, and the budget includes 2.5, essentially, of those. And there are 2 new pages that were given at your seats to switch out in your book. And that, so I also wanted to so that's my budget message. This is the agenda for this evening. James is going to give a quick budget summary, and then we're going to go through the department presentations. We certainly welcome questions through the presentations. And is there anything else that you wanted me to say? Okay. Any questions for me before I turn it over to James?
Thank you, Julia.
21 and 87.
So pages 21 and 87 are those two new pages that you can get rid of the ones that are in your book and replace them with the single ones that were provided today.
So it's a little higher. Okay.
All right, I'll give you a minute to shuffle those papers around. But just kind of as an overview, that was the budget message from Julia. I'll be giving a general budget summary.
That's okay.
And then I'll get into the general fund a bit. And then we'll have our department heads presenting their budgets. So we'll jump back and forth between different department heads as we go through the general fund and all the other funds.
Chair, I just have a, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I have a housekeeping question. There's the 5-year forecast general fund. Where should this go in the book? I just want to put my pages in.
Yeah, there's not a real designated place for that,
Okay.
but it can go in
Like
the
if
back.
maybe, like if I'm comparing them, should that go? What? Maybe with 29?
It's up to you, but there are page numbers in the rest of it, but not in that section, so it might be best to put it in the back.
Okay. And then there's
So that's the detailed line-by-line information.
just put in the back?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's meant to be a supplemental
thank you.
item for the back. Any other housekeeping questions? All right, well, I'll start with the overview of our fund structure. The city has 15 funds, and in my perspective, it's a pretty simple structure, which I like. There's not a lot of extra things that just have a small amount of stuff in it. So in the governmental side of things, there is the general fund. There are 4 special revenue funds. We do not have a debt service fund. And there are 2 capital project funds. And then on the proprietary side, where there are enterprise funds, there are 6 enterprise funds and then 2 internal service funds. Now, you can't just take the entire $38.2 million and divide it as you want into different funds, and that's because many of these funds are restricted. They must be used for specific purposes. That's why those funds were raised in the first place, by different fees or grants. But unrestricted funds are those that you can use for anything. And that's where the general fund comes into play. So as I mentioned, there are 15 funds, and here's the list of those. Those internal service funds you can kind of think of as overhead, with the facilities fund and the Public Works Administration Fund. The SDCs and enterprise funds are those restricted ones in the middle. The street fund, library, parks, and pool, also in that category.
SDCs is system development charges.
I just didn't get to that. And if you see PW, that's Public Works as well. And if we use any other acronyms that confuse you, please stop us. I think we have a question.
Chair. So in the restricted funds, those are funds that you can't, can you explain, you can't use them for anything else than what they're designated for, but can you put money into them? From the general fund?
Yes, those funds have been raised or given for a specific purpose, so that means we cannot change that use that they're designated for. And I think you're asking, like, can you put money from an unrestricted fund into those funds? The answer is yes.
Okay.
You can move money from the general fund, say, to the pool fund, and we do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Luke's got a question.
Does that transfer include the utility funds?
So again, you can transfer from an unrestricted fund to a restricted fund.
Okay.
Yeah, usually that is done for one-time purposes, and it's not generally responsible use of funds, maybe, unless it's, for a standing reason. But we've done it last year, or the current budget year, we did it one time for street funding. And we do have some general fund subsidies that go to 3 areas that we'll talk about. Those are ongoing transfers. But the amounts fluctuate as the need fluctuates. So that's a decision for this body if that wants to be changed. Yeah. Okay, so citywide, this budget is $38.2 million. It's up from $35.9 in fiscal year '24. The beginning fund balance in this budget is $17.2 million, similar to what it was last year, $18 million. The unappropriated ending funding balance is at $9.9 million, whereas last year it was $11.5. And the spending plan, all up, excluding the transfers, is $21.8 million. This slide shows what the property owners pay, the proportion of each dollar on property taxes. So that second portion represents the city of Stayton at 22 cents of every dollar. And then if you look all the way down to those last 2 slivers of the dollar, you'll see the recreation levy, which is split between parks and pool, and the library levy. So those are the 3 sections that go to the city. As a summary of the total revenue, I want to talk about the terminology firstly. You might see revenues and you might see resources at different times. The only difference there is that resources includes the beginning fund balance. So when you look at the total budget number, that $38 million, that includes the beginning balance. So we're allocating an entire budget, including the beginning balances. We're not showing all that to be spent, but when you add your beginning balance to your revenues, you get resources. And similarly, on the expense side, there are requirements and then there's expenses. Expenses are basically the money that you plan to spend that year, whereas requirements includes contingencies and unappropriated funds. So you add those together and you would get requirements. So sometimes we might talk about expenses that would be smaller than requirements, and we might talk about revenues, which is a smaller number than resources. This pie chart represents the revenues, and you can see that the bulk of it is charges for services. That's where we charge our utility customers. Taxes, most of that is our property tax income, as well as our levies and our local gas tax. Then we've got intergovernmental, the next largest section. That's where it's mostly our grants and the state gas tax and the CCRLS, which funds the library. Other revenues is predominantly the interest earned, and franchise fees also makes up a good portion of our revenue. Some of our revenue assumptions as we built this budget are the property taxes. This is our permanent rate that we collect per thousand of assessed value. And the estimates are up 3.3%. So we get this estimate based on information from the Marion County Assessor's Office. Also, we don't assume that full amount will be collected, but only 97% of it, because that is the average collection rate over time. The local option levy, as a reminder, this current levy will fund us through fiscal year '26. And this is our recreation and library levies that are assessed on that per $1,000 of assessed value. In terms of the other revenues, we have some increases in our utilities. This is based on the study done recently from our utility rate consultants, and those are modest increases, water and wastewater in general at 3%, That wastewater number of 3% is for the residential rate, whereas 6 3/4 is mostly commercial and industrial. That was one of the findings in the utility rate study, is that our residents were paying a higher proportion than they probably should have for wastewater. So that's why the increases are not the same for those different sectors. Stormwater, while it is increasing 40%, it represents a smaller dollar amount on citizens' utility bills. The franchise fee revenues, and quite a bit increase in the budget, but in actuality, the revenue received from last year compared to this year is about the same. It's just that the budget last year wasn't set as high as the reality ended up being. The street fee we have remaining unchanged from the current year, fiscal year 24, so it is still at the $4 per month for single-family residents. And our interest earnings, I just wanted to make a note of this, that we've budgeted quite a bit higher than in the past. The interest rate earnings on our cash and investments is quite a bit higher than it was budgeted. So we've increased the budget there. We do expect those rates to drop in the future, but we're enjoying them while they're as high as they are. We have also shifted a lot of our money into Umpqua Bank, which has a higher interest earnings than the LGIP, which is the local government investment pool. On the expenditure side, in summary, when I looked at this chart from my outsider perspective, having worked at the state for about 15 years and the private sector and nonprofit, the personal services seems low to me. I haven't been in city governments long, but just from an outsider perspective, I thought I'd share that just seems pretty low proportionally. And also our capital outlay. So the amount of projects we're doing seemed quite large to me when I saw this pie for the first time. So just to say that we have a lot of projects going on, we're investing, and that's a good sign. Also, our debt is pretty low, I would think. Let's see. As a summary from our personnel, this includes 53.95 positions. That's up 1 position from last year, and we'll talk about that. It's in the Public Works Administration Department. That'll be a brand new position. Other than that, there are 3 other changes, basically just shifting positions from one area to another. One of those is 0.2 of an FTE is changing from Public Works to Planning. It's not changing any duties, but just assigning that cost in the payroll department instead of being funded by a transfer. It's a little cleaner this way. Also, our court clerk, we're reducing the allocation from 0.8 court clerk to a 0.5. Again, no change in duties, but it just seems that her time is not spent in heavily as the court as was budgeted last year, so it's just a reallocation of the budget there. So that will impact the court budget by reducing the cost there, but in actuality, like I said, the workload is not changing.
Director James, we've got a question over here.
I'm not sure if this is for you, but if we're changing what our expectation of the court is, should we be lowering their time if we're adding more work?
I've spoken to the court clerk as well as the judge, and I think you're referring to the ad package where we're prosecuting more misdemeanors in court. We still think that it would need a half-time position to do all of this job, so it was considered when we reallocated the FTE.
All right.
Thank you. And the final move was just shifting a position from the facilities area up into admin. Again, job duties not changing, but just reallocating where that position is funded. And just quickly, this is our debt summary. We have 3 funds with debt, being water, wastewater, and stormwater. The balance of that debt is $11.3 million. And our capital outlay summary, we have a number of projects going on, as we were saying. The bulk of the dollars is in the wastewater area, followed by water and parks, streets, stormwater. A lot of these projects are funded by our systems development charges, SDCs. And so there are a number of different projects going on. And this is just a summary of that. So that was citywide budget introduction. And now we're going to move to the general fund itself. So here is a pie of the general fund revenue. I'll speak about most of these.
Director, we've got a question from Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the slide with the FTEs, in the ad package, we're going to add on a whole FTE, correct?
Yes.
So the rest of it is just moving time around?
Yes.
Okay. Also, okay, sorry, one more question. So for the pool, I know we're actively trying to hire people. Are we currently at the 4.64?
So we have way more than 4.64 bodies, right? But that's what we budget hours for. So when we're scheduling at that. But we have, maybe,
Okay.
I don't know the exact, maybe 20 lifeguards, but
Okay.
some of them aren't always working.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, just back on that slide on FTEs, is the intern included in there, or is that just a separate budget allocation?
No, the intern is not a city employee, so it's not included there.
Gotcha, thank you.
Jonathan, you've got a question?
So going to what Member Ort was saying about the addition of a full-time employee, the changes with that, I saw also in the ad package that there was in the Public Works Administration a reclassification of an employee. Would that be showing up here? Okay. That would be
No, it was a full-time position, still is a full-time position, so there's no impact on this chart. There is a financial cost, so there is a additional
Okay, so there-
salaries being paid to that position.
Okay.
And in the ad package, the half, we mentioned that there was 5 ads, and we were proposing to fund 4.5, 3.5, sorry. So one in Public Works, they had originally proposed 2 new staff, and so that might be what you were looking at. And we only funded 1 new staff. And then the other person is a full-time person currently who is in the current budget, budgeted 100% in Public Works admin, and then paid for by planning through transfers. And what we're proposing to do is have them be 0.8 in Public Works admin and 0.2 in planning.
Okay, so
they're
it's just basically the same job, you're just reclassifying so it's cleaner in the account.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so general fund revenue. The taxes portion of this, again, is the property taxes mostly. We have some in lieu of property taxes included in there, and marijuana taxes are in that category. The grants and contributions is $120,000 for a Safe Streets grant. Skipping to the licenses, permits, and fees. This is
Director James?
Yes.
We've got another question from Luke.
Which page are we on?
In the book, around page 27 or 28. So just as a reminder, this slide presentation isn't before you, just on the screen, but we are in general following with the book, so I'm sorry if I'm skipping around in there.
So we don't get the page with the pie chart.
No, that pie chart is not going to be in your book.
It is hard to follow if I'm seeing pictures I don't see in my book.
Yeah.
Noted for next year.
So on the screen, the licenses, permits, and fees, most of that is the planning department, about 25,000. And second would be the residential rental fee that we collect of about $10,000 in there. Fines and forfeitures is what we collect for our court system. Intergovernmental is mostly the HUD grant that we have currently, budgeted $415,000. There's also the liquor tax in this category, about $176,000, and other revenue sharing there. Interest and other, most of that is interest, followed by cell tower rent and rent for our movie theater and Moose Lodge, and a storm fund loan is included in that category. And then the transfers in, all funds, this funds the admin overhead. In terms of the general fund expenditures now, different pie. This is categorized by department. And I'll let you look at that for a little while. Admin, police, economic development. This has been renamed. It used to be just called planning. Now it's economic and community development. All right. And followed by the community center. This is where we are now. Municipal court, street lights, mayor, city council, and general operations, which is where transfers out occur.
Director James, we've got a couple questions. Jonathan, you want to go first?
Yes. So speaking of the expenditures for the general fund, I'm a little bit confused in the book about how the funding for the rare intern is going to be happening. So on page 28 of my book, it says that it has $60,000 allocated, and that's in the general fund section. But then when I was reading in the economic development section, it says that there is $26,000 allocated, which I would assume be from their budget. I know you reduced that down to 25 in your opening statement that you were making. So where is the funding for that, and how much funding is for that in the budget?
And I'm sure Jennifer can clarify more when she gets into her presentation, but the share of the position is $25,000, but when you submit for the rare intern, they recommend that you also submit for a Ford Family Foundation grant of $10,000. It sounds like almost always awarded if you get the intern, and so we've allocated it because it's an expenditure, so we have to budget what we're going to spend, but as far as like impact to the budget, we're anticipating it's going to be closer to $15,000, not $25,000.
So you budgeted for the full 2018 in case the grant doesn't come through?
No, we've budgeted for the full, well, yes, but we have to, we can't spend money unless it's budgeted, even if we get money to offset it. So the revenue is revenue, but we still have to budget for the expenditure, and since we'll be paying out $25,000 if we get the grant, we have to budget $25,000. Yeah.
And then our expected
Yes.
thank you for clarifying that. And then also, what fund is that coming out of? Because, that would be, thank you. What fund is that coming out of? Because I'm seeing it being mentioned in both the general fund and the community and economic development.
So the community and economic development is a department within the general fund.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And there's more details in the rare intern ad package, which is ad package number 4, which is part of the supplemental information.
Okay. Thank you.
And we've got another question. Member Steve?
Well, I'll just start out saying thanks for all the hard work, Julia and staff. Hopefully, this what I'm saying may add a little more to that, depending on how this goes. But so, I've been looking at the general fund expenditure, and the status quo is really not working for our streets. And I'm just going to bring up streets ahead of time before we go into a lot of the other stuff. But our PCI index is going down, the pavement condition index, the streets are deteriorating. And I did the read ahead, and we're only doing 150,000 in capital funds, or capital overlays for streets. There's the overlay and the milling, but capital improvements were pretty light for streets, I think. And I really think we have to find a way to transfer some general fund expenditures into the street fund to help pave the way for some street improvements. And quite frankly, I think the only way to get there, because the small amount we're putting in is not going to get there, is a $10 million bond. And I looked at the numbers. If I remember correctly, it was about $600,000 a year to pay for the $10 million bond to cover the expense of that. But in order to do that, I think we're going to have to use some of our, maybe make cuts, find the money somewhere to transfer some money into our street fund to cover for this $10 million bond. So, how do we fund it? You may have to make cuts. I don't know. It depends on what kind of support I have from everybody else. But there's some things I saw in the budget that we could definitely cut. I mean, the community improvement grant, maybe talk about something else, some other alternate thing for a tractor, and the intern, and the storage space for your new, there was $80,000 you were talking about for improvements so we could have a meeting room. But anyway, I would like to propose a $300,000 transfer from the general fund into the street fund to help pay for this $10 million bond, and it would only be for capital improvements, not the overlay, milling, our good and very good streets. This would be for poor and very poor streets. So Lance might need another civil engineer if this happens. Anyway, but if we could do a $10 million bond, we could do $2 million a year in capital improvements to our streets, and I think that's the only way we're going to get there. But in conjunction with $300,000 coming from the general fund, and it's another conversation for the city council, but I do think if we raised our street fees to $10 per household per month, that would generate another $270,000. We've talked about raising it $4, but I think 10 is the number we'd need, and that would, between the street fee and additional transfer from the general fund, that would just about cover the cost of a $10 million bond. And we could actually, if people started seeing these improvements right away, I think everybody would be pretty good with spending the money, the extra $6 a month or $4, whatever the council decides. I'm just giving my proposal, but I think people would be okay with the extra expenditures for streets if they saw a lot of improvements. I mean, we could do $2 million a year for the next 5 years with this to improve our streets in the city and stop this decline in the condition of our streets. And that, I don't know if I have any support for this, but this is one of the ideas I thought. I think it's the only way, because that is one of our primary objectives, is to try to improve the infrastructure here in town.
Jonathan, did you have another question?
Yes, I did, but did people have theirs before me, or was I first? Okay. So this question is related to what Councilor Sim was saying, a little bit tangentially. So if we're talking about transferring more funds from the general fund into one of our other funds in there, I see that there is this contingency and unappropriated section. So this is my first time with Budget Committee. I'm not entirely certain on all the accounting terms, but my understanding is that unappropriated funds are funds that have been set aside for a specific purpose in the future, and contingency funds are just extra cash on hand that we keep in case of an emergency. Is that correct, James?
Yes, very correct.
Okay, and then it was also looking in the fiscal policies that the contingency needed to be 5% of the operating fund, but I was doing the math in my head and it was coming around to somewhere about like 3.5%. So am I doing the math wrong, or is there something with that? Because I just want to know how much extra disposable money that is not being allocated or spent on anything that we have in the general fund, just to start off with?
Yeah, contingencies have different requirements for different funds. I think in general, the street fund does have a 5% contingency.
Okay.
There might be a working capital contingency as well, but you're on the right track.
Okay. So would that mean that, like, of the, what is this? We're in 20, so of the 291,000 in contingency funds, is that something that we can be touching? Or is that something that has to be set aside? Is there extra above our minimum requirement budgeted in there? Or when you are making this document, do you just allocate the minimum that is needed on hand for contingency?
The contingency is, in order to meet our fiscal policies, we need to set that contingency aside.
Okay, so
in
is
each
that
fund.
So is that number the requirement for the fiscal policies, or is there extra money that's mixed in there?
Do you see the two?
Does that make?
The street fund, the 291.
in the general fund?
Yes, for the general fund. So for the general fund.
Well, the street fund has its own contingency, so it's probably best to look there first, wanting to spend street funds. But the general fund contingency is meant to cover general fund contingencies throughout the year.
Okay.
It's not, I mean, I think this number here is not more than it needs to be. That's his question.
That's correct, yeah, the 290.
That's what I was
yes,
wondering. That's what I
yes.
was wondering. I was talking about the contingency. Yes, and is that the same true for the unappropriated, that the unappropriated funds are funds that have been set aside for a specific purpose and we can't use? Or
No, they're not required to meet any budget policy or item in the budget.
Okay.
It's you could think of it as an ending fund balance that's not needed. And just as a reminder that we learned in the last council meeting, unappropriated funds are not allowed to be used during the year unless an emergency is declared to use them.
Okay.
Yes, they can be allocated before the budget is approved.
So we could be using some of our unappropriated funds to be funding projects. So if we're wanting to add more into streets, we could be taking some of that out of this fund, so that way we're not having to cut as many other programs. Is that a correct
Yes, the
understanding?
street fund's unappropriated balance is a good place to look if you want to spend more street money.
Okay, well, I think Councilor Sims was mentioning something about taking the money from the general fund and doing a transfer into the street fund, like had happened last year, if my understanding is correct.
And I know that there's some more questions, and we certainly want to take those. I appreciate the just sort of like cutting to the chase right from the start. Yeah. I do want to make sure that we have an opportunity to kind of go through all of the funds. I will say I am concerned. I'm certainly watching that unappropriated fund, and we want to, in general, I want to make sure that it's generally the same from year to year, because that means we're not using it for our ongoing operations. I think, that last year we did it for the one time, and that was fine. But when you look at our 5-year forecast, which I'm not overly concerned about right now, but it is very concerning that next year we're showing that we're not compliant, where we're not meeting our fiscal policies. So it's like, I don't want to spend all of our unappropriated down to the bare minimum and then be in real hurt next year. And so trying to balance that, aggressive with conservative at the same time. So that's just some kind of all of those things we're keeping.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I was just thinking that if we were going to have a conversation about finding more money, I wanted to know how much extra reserves we had, so that way we would know better what we could be possibly not having to cut if we are allocating more money to streets, just so we all could have a little bit of a better discussion. But I do think that is a good point, that we want to be sure we're having some capital on hand. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Luke, you've got a question?
Regarding that $10 million bond, is that the same plan we were told about, that's we do something for 5 years and then we do almost nothing for 25 years? Because while that sounds great to get stuff done now, it leaves us $20 million in today's money unable to do anything for 30 years when it's going to be $60 million, and the streets we do today are going to be not as great as they are today, but they're still going to be in need. So we're going to be in the same hole and unable to do anything for 20 years. And most of us aren't going to be here to have that conversation. Is it fair to saddle us with a plan that doesn't solve the problem, just kind of puts the lipstick on the pig, gets a couple of streets good, but is still a halfway solution, or not even a halfway, it's a quarter-way solution?
Leonard, we've got another question from Member Leonard.
Since joining this budget committee and going to city council meetings, I've taken upon myself to kind of drive around and really look. And I want to specifically, he didn't really bring up anything specific, but I want to specifically talk about the oldest of neighborhoods, the oldest of streets. St. Mary's to Stayton Elementary, some of the inner streets in there. Probably more specifically the streets near Pinewood Park, okay, and such. They're deplorable. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's been put off and put off. I'm wondering, I have questions for anybody here. And I want to make it clear, I'm not blaming anybody here. I mean, obviously, they're so bad, they should have been taken care of a long time ago, and now they're in our lap. Okay, so I was wondering if, because I ran into it today, has anybody been approached and said, I don't want a sidewalk on my street? Seriously. Okay, I ran into that today with somebody who said, fix the street, but no sidewalks. They don't want that, they want this, that, and the other. Lance, I'm sure you remember at the streets meeting, you were mentioning any reconstructed streets that go in will require sidewalks and drainage. And I'm going to also assume maybe ADA. Yeah, which probably doubles or triples the price? You want me to stay here?
I'm sorry, it's a concern, and I'm kind of in agreement with what he's talking about, but at the same note, if somebody could clear a few things up in regards to our streets and why it's gone on so long that nothing's happened.
I could have waited, but I'll just come up and speak a little bit about that. The city does have design standards that I must follow, and any kind of developer that comes into the city that does any kind of development, the citizens and the city council and the city manager expect me to have them follow that. Those are the expectations placed on me. Now, if the city council wants to change those standards and request that those are changed, I'm obliged to do that. What I will say, though, is if we're going to pave any road, it is an ADA requirement that we put ADA approaches in at every corner. That's a law. We could get sued if we do not do that.
Understandable.
So if for example, we're doing 3rd Avenue here, Ida Street here in the coming weeks. We'll be replacing all those ADA ramps, not all the sidewalks, but all the ADA ramps, because it's a requirement. I don't know if I answered your questions, but I have to follow our
There are a couple
standards.
of citizens I talked to today, and I wasn't given any specific, anything of what's been discussed here or whatever, but it totally blew me away because I didn't even ask. These two ladies said, we don't want sidewalks in this area. It'll hurt our parking. It'll hurt this. We don't want it. We like the way the old place looks. Just haven't fixed the damn street. And it's like,
Here's
in the
what
back of my head, I'm thinking, didn't Lance say we had that? And I didn't say it.
Here's the last thing I'll say to that, and then I'll go back to my chair. While you heard that from two ladies, I hear numerous calls per month from people in wheelchairs that they need those sidewalks and they need those ADA ramps. They do not feel safe getting on our streets and trying to plug away to get over to Ross from Ida Street. That's a hump.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for us to spend some of our dollars to repair those sidewalks and put ADA ramps in so they can use them. So while there might be a few that say they don't want them, there's probably that many or more that need them. just to survive.
Just a back thought, because of this maybe pushback from some citizens on that and stuff, because that stopped something in the past. I hope not, but I'm assuming. Like I said, I'm just trying to do a little homework as I looked at this budget. There are some streets that definitely need help, and I agree with the extra. And I think, yeah, definitely it weighs more to the good than anybody's negativity about it. But some of the streets are narrow, overgrown, heck, some people might even complain, hey, that's on my property. And then my question to that is part of their property gonna have to be offered for purchase? And the only reason I do know about that is I saw it happen in Redmond, Oregon. Literally, a whole big street that they wanted to put in, they were literally, so they could widen it out, purchasing and offering to buy and from the citizens. So hopefully we don't run into that. But I will relinquish at this point.
Thank you, Member Leonard. We've got another question from Member David.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I wanted to speak in support of Member Sims' suggestion. I think, as I've been thinking about it, and was brought up here, I think that this is the appropriate time for the conversation, and it's a little tricky because I know we haven't gotten to the specifics of each of the funds. But one of the issues that I'm having is that I don't think that it's really like a details conversation, right? It's more of a on that first page, on that third page we went through, and when we went through the budget summary, the first item of our council goals is infrastructure improvements and reallocating a sustainable funding source for those improvements. And we've been asked, and what's been suggested to us has been raising rates on our citizens, which I do agree should fund a portion of the street improvements. But I also think that if we're asking our tax-paying citizens to pay more, we need to reallocate resources from our general fund, because that is flexible resources. And I do think that while there might be a small percentage that can be coming from unappropriated funds, I think that the bulk of the funding needs to come from a source that we feel more confident is going to be an ongoing source that we can budget into not only this, and obviously I know that we're not actually making the budget into the future, but I think we want to think about it more as how can we provide a sustainable subsidy for the street fund from the general fund, because I think that needs to reflect the goals. And so one of the things is to how do we set the policy to reflect that? I think there's a number of things that have been pointed out by Member Sims, that when we compare it against funding for streets, especially when we know, I think that we can't probably have the conversation about the grant until we get to the street fund, and maybe we don't even finish that conversation now. I think that's fine. I think that is a separate conversation. I think regardless, more money needs to go to streets. But I think we're thinking about the fact that that's on the table, and then combined with the fact that, man, if we could raise the rates to $10 and get the other half from the citizens, and then we're putting the half from this, I think that it really is an appealing solution to me. And that's why I feel like it is one that we should have the conversation about now. I think that where I would find the money is probably, and the other issue is that I think a lot of the money that can be found, where the cuts are going to come from, are going to be smaller cuts that aren't really on our overview, right? Like a lot of them are probably going to come from just cutting back a little bit on materials and services, different areas like that. And I know that you gave us a more in-depth look at that now, but I don't think that a lot of it's going to be. I do think that I agreed with the examples that Member Sims provided as absolutely things that I'm willing to cut. I would be willing to even go further in my cuts, but I think that's a great starting point. And is to say, I'm willing to cut a lot of things. I don't think anything that it's essential, right? To say that streets are an essential service that need to be funded on an ongoing basis from the general fund. And that's where I think it's a shift of philosophy, it's a shift of policy. And that's why I think it's almost hard for us to have a specific conversation around all the details as a member community, as a member body, and more of a discussion around what's our philosophy and where do we want to be allocating generally the resources. Hopefully that was helpful.
I've got a quick question before I proceed to have these other questions taken. Either Julia or member Brian, could you help me out to keep things on a roll here? Are we still just at Director James's budget overview? Is this the time for all of these questions?
Yeah, I thank you for that. I was going to suggest, I think we're hearing a theme that my guess is going to come throughout the course of the presentations and going forward. Certainly, I'm hearing wanting to get some more information on what that might look like if we do deeper cuts in the general fund. But I would recommend that we get into the presentations, because you might have questions that help move this further along, or help highlight maybe where things really aren't cuttable. So I would recommend doing that so that we can move along. I know that there's still some people that have some questions, but I think that the topic is out there, and we will continue to talk about it, I'm sure, through the course of.
And thank you for your clarification, because I like to, on any other board that I've ever been on, I like to stick to the agenda items, and I wasn't sure if Director James' presentation was done, because having been here last year, but that was my first time, I know that all of the other department heads are going to fill your heads with lots of numbers, so there'll be plenty of time for Q&A, and I don't know if this is the right time. Let's get done with that presentation and then move on to the next thing on the agenda item, if we can, please. So,
Chair, just a housekeeping. I got a text from someone who's watching online, and they can't hear you speak. So you need to move the microphone in your face when you're speaking, please.
And that applies to everybody, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just said they couldn't hear whoever was speaking, and I don't know when I got that text. So just move it closer to you, please. I myself included.
All right, thank you. I just have one more thing before I pass it on to the police chief. But this might be pertinent. It's about the transfers. So I just wanted to bring up that there are 6 different transfers that we have. All of our transfers in match our transfers out. These are all internal state and Stayton transfers. So one of those is funds the administration department. That's a general fund income from the other funds. There's also a similar public works transfer in from the public works funds to fund that department. Then there are general fund subsidies. This is where the general fund sends money out to library, parks, and pool. Fourth, there is a capital building reserve. This is where $100,000 is brought in to a building fund every year from various funds. Fifth, there are SDC transfers. These are the system development charges that are transferred from those SDC funds, where they collect it to the applicable utility fund or enterprise fund. And the final transfer is the ARPA allocation, and that is from the general fund to stormwater and wastewater. So those 6 different things make up our transfers, ins and outs. And that concludes the general fund presentation.
Thank you, Director James. We'll put a check mark next to that bullet item. And our next item is budget review. And I see management team. Julie, if you could give me a little clarification. I don't see any subsets under management team, so.
Police department. Okay.
Good evening. So I'll be doing the police presentation, and honestly, just a status quo request moving forward, but providing 24/7 high-quality police services. So we are very proud to offer the 24-hour service. Not all small agencies do. We're looking at strengthening our partnerships with other law enforcement agencies through specialized teams, like we've got our sergeant on the SWAT team. So when we call for those specialized teams, we've actually been a part and participant on those to benefit other areas as well. joint trainings. That way we can partner for resources and specialized training and backgrounds with instructors, and then also partnering on events. And then looking at strengthening community relations with events, educations, and programs. So this morning we did Coffee with Cop, and just great conversations. It doesn't always even involve the police stuff, so we have extended conversations about the city and our community, which is really nice. Enhance traffic safety through increased participation in grants, traffic safety enforcement events. So we do look where we can for grant monies, and then get our officers out there with extra hours and enforcement with traffic issues that we see within our community. So highlights from this last fiscal year. We supported the Stayton and Santiam Canyon through participation in lots of different events and fundraisers for community programs and I guess nonprofits. We hired Officer Tremblay, Babcock, and Bielenberg, and those can be very time intensive. It takes our training officers time and commitment into training them and getting them ready to be a solo qualified officer. Staff completed 2,179 hours of training. This is really important with our new officers to get them up and running to where they need to be, getting them specialized training in investigations, doing interviews, doing specialized sort of enforcement like DUIs. So all that does take time to get officers up to the levels that we need and want them to be in our community. We brought back Coffee with the Cop, hosted our first police forum, and engaged citizens in education and conversation about what we do in the community, some of the whys behind what we do. We began a fleet lease program to replace our patrol cars. So you'll see that when we talk about capital outlay, the police department no longer has capital outlay expense. That just falls into our regular budget with the lease and the equipment falling into there. Strengthen resiliency program, focusing on wellness and overall health of our officers. That way we've got healthy officers with longevity that are better able to serve our community. Continued partnerships with our chaplaincy and Cortico Wellness app. We had a very strong focus on training of our current staff and increasing our professional capacity. A lot of what we do is not just intuitive. You know, you have to have that specialized training from other professionals in our field. We build our own in-house instructor force. That way we can, rather than having to go to outside trainings all the time, we can have our own people in-house, so there's not travel fees, and we can just maybe pull officers out for a few hours at a time and do their training where we're able to. We have our own range, which is amazing and actually a regional asset for us in the area. We partnered with the library to bring, or will be partnering for the summer to bring a safety camp to our youth. And it's a great partnership both in how we bring it and the staffing and the resources that we have for that. And we're currently working towards accreditation, hopefully by fall of 2024. And that is done with our own staff time and then some grant money that I went out and found in order to do the management of that. And then our patrol team is fully staffed currently. This is something we've worked hard for over the last few years. It's not super common in law enforcement right now. There's a lot of agencies that are understaffed and trying to fill, and that can be a hardship on an agency to not be fully staffed for a lot of reasons. When you do bring on new staff, that takes a staff member to train them, and so you're always just kind of a little bit behind trying to get caught up and everybody gets solo. So we're hoping by this summer, that we are solo staff 100% and can go out full force and do what we do.
So the PD budget is on page 33 of your budget book. If you have any questions for Chief Johns.
Okay, we've got questions from the other corner down there. Who was first among you three? One of you go.
Okay, looks like it was me. So I have a question. So looking at the materials and services change from the 2024 to 2025, it increases by about $100,000. So looking through the more detailed supplemental budget, it looks like a lot of that is coming from the leasing of the new police cars and all of the costs associated with that. But then there's
Right.
also, I did a rough estimate, and I had about a $33,000 increase in the category that's called equipment, under $10,000.
Yep.
So,
And I can easily explain that.
Yes,
So,
that's what I was
yeah, so the capital outlay is where we had our vehicles previously. Now with the lease, that's moved into the lease line. And that allows us to get newer cars sooner and hopefully cut back on our maintenance. And then the equipment, what you see, when we get a new car, we've got to outfit it to be a police car. So that would be the equipment that goes into the police car. So that's everything from the overhead lights, the siren box, the cage that goes in back, the special restraint systems, the gun rack, the computer. So that's what those would be.
okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Yep, great question.
Go ahead, Member David.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. I just had a question on page 33 in regards to performance measures. I was kind of looking at the year over year on citations and warnings, and it looks like there was this pretty heavy increase from 22 to 23. And I was just kind of curious about that figure. What would you attribute that to? And then I had a general question about it as well.
I think it has to do with a few things. We're getting staff that's solo qualified and getting out there and doing their own traffic stops. So anytime I've got someone in training, that coach is pulled out, right, and paired up with the new recruit. And then I get the new recruit out and they can make their own stops. But I think some of it too is just heavier use of our grant to some degree, and then just a focus. You know, we've made a pretty concentrated focus that we want to be out there doing traffic enforcement.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And one follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
I'm just curious, how do you break out data as far as when citations are issued and Marion County Jail refuses to lodge an offender?
Say that again.
How do you break out data where there's a refusal to lodge by Marion County Jail, but there is citation to arrest an offender?
So we do, we have citations that are traffic citations that are totally separate from arrest citations. And then I'm not sure if I'm 100% answering your question, but if we charge someone with a crime, that whether it's on a piece of paper or it's physically taking them to jail, it counts as an arrest. So maybe the data that you're thinking of is like the prosecution level, and that's a little bit different.
No, but I think you answered my question. I think arrests is where this number would be encapsulated, and you wouldn't just cite and release somebody in lieu of their own recognizance in the figure that's listed for citations and warnings. Is that kind of how I
Yeah, and
understand that?
citations and warnings is traffic.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
not arrest.
And Chief, looks like we've got another question from Member Jordan.
Yes. Thank you, Chief. Chair. Chief. So you've mentioned several times that we've gotten grants to do like DUI stops or seatbelt checks or whatnot. How does that fit into, so I would assume, because we don't have revenue per se coming in to the police department, because that would come into the courts if they have fines and whatnot, but how does that, does any of that offset the budget for our personnel services, the grants that we get?
So James could probably speak better to it, but I have to budget for overtime as if I'm spending it, right, with the grant. The grant money is paid back after we do payroll, and the grant money goes back into general fund. So I budget it as if I've spent it, and then we will get a check back later after it's been spent that goes to general fund, so I won't see it back in my line item.
But that's only overtime? It's never any regular hours?
The grant.
Yeah.
They can do some matches, but they've got pretty specific rules about how it's done. So there is some match money, but most of it is on overtime, yes.
Okay. And do they take that into account, that it's overtime money, or that it's overtime dollars being spent when they're giving grants out?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole formula we go through when we're doing that ask for the money.
And what happens if there's an emergency during that time and there's an officer who's using time for that grant?
And
Are
that does
they-
sometimes happen. So then we just revert them back to being on our time and not grant time.
And that time could be spent at a later date?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Looks like we've got another question for you, Chief, from Member Bryan.
Chief, are you aware that cities have their ability now to do fixed radar? Issue citations from fixed radar unoccupied?
Meaning like posted on,
Actually have a machine there to capture the speed and then enforce it that way?
so I haven't looked into it, but it's very
You're not aware?
costly.
So that's why I was asking if you were aware of it or not, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, at least in my understanding, like the company that comes in does a study to understand if it's going to be cost effective to them to be present. And as, I mean, it's a, uses a study to see if it's beneficial to them
Yeah, I
as a
gotcha.
company as well as beneficial to the city
Yep,
itself.
I follow you. The legislature thought it was beneficial for the cities to make that call, so just something new this last session and the short session.
Gotcha.
So,
I just wanted to note, you haven't asked, but I'll note anyways, one of the ad proposals was an SRO, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that that is not included in the budget. Yes, sorry, school resource officer. In part, it's not completely dead, but there was some hiccups, some miscommunication perhaps between the school district and Sublimity that was going to do some cost sharing, and so we need to have additional conversations with the school district about what if we were to continue to pursue a school resource officer, what that might look like. And so given the uncertainty and the time at which we found out that there was some uncertainty, we decided to take that request out of the budget. So if we are able to reach some sort of a agreement with the school district that we think the council would be in favor of, then we will bring that to the council, and then if we need to, we'll do a supplemental budget.
Member Jordan, do we have another question?
I do. I have a new question. Okay, so for the transfers, I understand those to be like administrative costs for the most part, but then something you said, Julia, made me think of the bailiff, the court bailiff that is not going to be a full-time bailiff, but is going to be an officer pooled. So, and I apologize, I did not look in this, did not have time to look through the detailed portion of this. But is that covered in the transfers, the bailiff position hours?
It's either in the transfers or the personal services, but yes, we did account for that cost being borne by the court instead of the police for a portion of a sergeant.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I'd like to opine on my personal note, not speaking for the committee. Thank you for getting us up to fully staffed. I love that.
So next up is Community and Economic Development, and Jennifer Siciliano.
Thank you, Budget Commission. Members, yes. Yes, the Community and Economic Development Department handles the tasks of the planning. We usually work with developers who are either doing subdivisions or site plan reviews. So we look at the future long-range plans for the city and administrate, as I said, the land use ordinances, so that includes zoning. In my department, I do everything from pre-applications of people wanting to develop 40 acres in the urban growth boundary who want to annex to the city, to if somebody puts up a sign, they're going to come to me, a new business for a sign. So all of those things, I go from the large to the small. I have a code enforcement officer under me. She takes care of looking at when signs need to be replaced, when grass is grown too long, and when cars are parked or people are living in RVs. It takes care of making the quality of life better for the city of Stayton as well. So I also support economic development efforts, as I said, through land development and site plans, and also working with different groups from the state, talking to Business Oregon, which is the state economic development agency, and SEDCOR is a more local group, Travel Salem, and then I also speak to Revitalize Downtown Stayton and the local business owners to match what can be available. And that includes a range of community grants. So because you mentioned about roads, I'll mention at this point. So there are 2 grants. So one of them is the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. And if you notice in my budget, my proposed budget looks like it's gone up by quite a bit, but it's actually the addition of $120,000 from the grant that will be reimbursed, so that's the way that James and accounting has to work. It looks like I'm paying more out, but it's actually going to be reimbursed. And so we're hoping that that plan, always looking at the long-term effects, that we can have some action items that can eventually be funded for road improvements. So we're always thinking about roads and streets. And then when it comes to the rare intern, I had seen that we had a rare intern for a couple of years in the past with Dan here, and one of the rare interns actually applied for the grant, the HUD grant that brought $450,000 that I'm still working through right now. So talking to the rare program, they really like a rare intern to do economic development and get out in the community. So I thought that I could match the goals of the city council, which is increasing economic development strategies, and that they would focus on that, but also one of the projects. So I had to give them about 3 different projects for them to do. And the other one is something that we don't really have that much staff time for, but I would love to do, and that is community development block grants. And if you know, our demographics really don't qualify citywide to get community development block grants, but I know for a fact, I've worked on projects before where HUD will pay for the rehabilitation of a street if a majority are low income. So what you can do is you can survey, everybody has to be able to you have to get the people to tell you what their income is, so it's a little bit difficult. But if there is a street that you know that the majority, at least 51%, are low and moderate income, so maybe there's a place where there's lots of seniors or something, that you can target that for street grant. So I'm just mentioning this because that's how I connect the long-term planning to grants and to what you want to do. So highlights, promoting vacant properties through regional agencies such as Travelville-Salem. As I mentioned, I gave them some properties. They were interested if we had anything for hotels or motels. And I gave them some things, anything from a boutique hotel to a larger hotel, maybe in the interchange zone. And I maintain networks with regional and local partners, as I mentioned. 15 land use pre-applications. I am anticipating much more from when I first started till the beginning of this year. The beginning of this year, I started getting one about every week. So, and that's everything from subdivisions to annexations, et cetera. So we've done 8 land use applications. And then, of course, I've been working with Santiam Industrial Center. They're going to be doing a site plan review. They're going to be enhancing their parking lot and docks. And then the completion is 172 units of multifamily housing. As you know, they're just about done with both those projects. Safe routes to school. Actually, it's a similar program, but it's Safe Streets for All and the Rare Intern. And then renewing the Public Arts Commission. We're hoping to have a meeting next week. It was going to schedule for this Thursday, but we thought that conflict with budget, so we didn't have that. But yep. And then continuing the economic development strategies and plans, as I said, and the safety action plan, and having the Rare Intern, and then, you know, continuing on with all the development in the city.
And that budget is on page 37 of your budget book if you have any questions for Jennifer.
Thank you, Director Jennifer.
Thanks.
Nice to have you aboard.
Thank you.
And looks like we've got some questions popping up. Jonathan, were you up there first?
Yes, I was. Thank you, Jordan. All right. So I have some questions about the Rare Interns. So you mentioned that part of their job would be to do the income survey for the block grants.
Yes.
I've heard mention at council people talking about doing like an urban renewal district. So how would the economic planning for the long-range planning and the stuff that you're doing now with the intern, would that be connected at all to us getting one of those set up?
It isn't on the project list. I'm sure that it could tie into it, but that is really a different project that I'm definitely involved in. I mean, that's long-term planning.
Long-term. Okay. I was just wondering if the data would go between the two of them, or if that would be a building block to that.
I don't think the data would go between the two because they're different data sets, but the Rare Intern, so Jennifer had to submit, as she said, a list of projects, and essentially we're selected by the students and the school based on what they're interested in. And so it's got to be something, it can't just be like you're going to work in the office and file. It's got to be something that's going to help them grow, you know, and so it's got to be something that they want to choose. And I would imagine that if we got them, having the opportunity to work on an urban renewal district would be very exciting for them. But if we get one, we'll have to see kind of how that plays out.
Okay, I was just wondering about how all of this vast project that you guys are involved with city government works. So thank you for answering that.
And we've got another question. Member Jordan?
Yes, thank you. I was just curious about the transfers. So the proposed transfers are only 5,400, and previously they were 17,000. So it's significantly less for transfers.
Oh, I can explain that. That has to do with the administrative person. So the administrative person that works in Public Works. It used to be that she was full-time position for Public Works, and then they're transferred money. Actually, which direction? And so now she is going to be directly paid as a point two part of my personnel, and there won't be less transfers.
And then I did have another question, Chair. Okay, so I asked this, so you can be ready for it. And if you don't have the answer now. So with the rare person and our community engagement coordinator, it sounds like there's going to be some overlap in maybe in what we envision our community engagement coordinator doing. So is there a plan, or do we see the need to keep a full-time community engagement coordinator if we have the rare intern?
And I'll answer that because that's, they're very different. The rare intern is going to be very project specific for 1 year, whereas what the community engagement coordinator is really a citywide function that supports all of the departments. And the community engagement coordinator may be supporting the rare intern if we get them, and the rare intern may provide some resources to the community engagement coordinator, but they're different functions and duties.
Thank you.
Looks like we got another question. Member Bryan, please.
Julia, I appreciate you phrasing it that way. However, the last rare intern, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alyssa probably knows, did a lot of survey stuff, correct? Or whoever, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a rare intern at the time based on the functions of what they were asked to do at the time. I mean, I guess I don't know if they did citywide stuff or not.
I don't believe we did a citywide survey, not like the big survey like what I think you're talking about that we've done. It's been several years now.
Yeah.
I don't recall exactly. I know that he worked, a huge part of what he did was working with RDS.
Yeah, right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So the reduction in your transfer because you're splitting a position, is that in hopes to have the rare intern?
No, that's just an accounting, really.
Yeah,
Just asking the obvious question.
Yeah, it's a housekeeping, we're, instead of paying for it with transfers, we're paying it for direct salaries. The position has always been a .2 supporting the planning and economic development unit. Instead of paying it with transfers, we're paying it directly through salaries, personal services.
Okay, so my last question on the rare person. So essentially it's a internship for their benefit for school.
Well,
we get a lot of benefit from it. We get a full-time planner.
Well, I'd like to know what the project list is.
So it is a person that is usually a graduate from planning, graduate level planning, and it's for 11 months full-time. And like Julia was saying, that they kind of pick what is exciting for them to do. So I decided to break up the different projects, and one maybe is not as so exciting about, it could be exciting, targeting the community development block grants, but I think that could bring in a lot of money for streets, and I know that's something, so that's going to be a definite project. And then the other project was working more with economic development and the small businesses in Stayton, and looking at our economic development strategies, because that was one of the goals for City Council, was to reevaluate those priorities. And one of the things that they want in the RARE program is to go out into the community directly and talk to people in the community. That's something that they have as a goal. So yeah, so and it does cost, but you're getting like a graduate level person for $25,000. But hopefully, at the same time I applied for this grant, I also applied for the Ford Foundation, which is a $10,000 they supplement. So in reality, you're going to be paying about, hopefully, $15,000 and getting somebody who will. And you know, I'm hoping to learn. I have a lot of experience in planning. I've been doing it for at least 15 years, and I think it would be interesting to see what the students are learning right out of school. That's another benefit to the city.
Thanks, Jennifer.
And it looks like our members are all through with questions, so thank you, Director Jennifer.
All right, next up is Alyssa talking about the community center.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So I am going to talk to you about the community center tonight. As you can tell, we use this building for a lot of meetings, and we also have rentals. Tomorrow night, we've got Marion County coming in to hold a some sort of public traffic safety session, and so it's used for a lot of things. A primary user is the senior meals program through the Northwest Senior and Disability Services, which is Meals on Wheels. They're using the facility 3 days a week currently, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they've finally been able to start bringing back congregate meals, which is the in-person. During COVID, they were solely delivering out to the seniors, but now they are starting to invite them back in and having meals here hosted to get them together. So during 23-24, 31 council, planning commission, and budget committee meetings were held here. As I mentioned, the meal program is happening. A lot of you probably have noticed that have been in and out of this building a lot. We replaced the front doors this last fiscal year. And I don't know about anybody else, but those of us who have to work the doors with keys are very happy, because we would sit out there after a meeting and fight the locks. So those were replaced, and actually we had budgeted quite a bit more, but the bids came in a lot lower, so we didn't have to spend all of that. And then also, if you weren't aware, we had a fire back here just over a year ago. There was a fire on the back patio, and we were able to complete the damage repairs from that this last fiscal year, just finished up in the last few months. And then now talking about the proposed budget, of course, the facility is going to continue to be used by the city and the public. It's definitely popular to rent, and hopefully we're going to start planning a project. So in this current fiscal year, we received a grant from Pacific Power Foundation for $1,000, and then a $25,000 grant from the State of Oregon Department of Human Services Aging and People with Disabilities program to assist with remodeling the community center kitchen. The reason that this project, it may seem kind of random that that's what we chose to do, but this grant was thanks to the NWSDS, which is the Northwest, the Meals on Wheels group. They brought this grant to our attention, that it is focused on helping communities who host these sorts of like Meals on Wheels type programs to help us improve our facilities, not only for our community, but for the people utilizing the Meals on Wheels program. And so we reached out, and they were like, yes, we'd love to give you $25,000. And I said, thank you. Are you sure? A few times. It almost seemed too easy. But so in this budget, you will see a total of $40,000 for that project. $26,000 is going to cover basically ripping out what you see in there, making it more of a workable kitchen space. And then also, I've been working with NWSDS to make sure that what we do benefits them as well. So you'll see there's a refrigerator sitting out here in the main lobby, those types of things. We're working with them to We're going to get 3 new refrigerator freezers that can take the place and get that out of here so that it'll be owned by the city and they can store their meals in them because of the amount of people that they're serving. And then the other portion of the project is replacing the floors in there. I would love to do the entire building. These floors are the original 1978, 79 floors. And so there is asbestos, and so it will require some mitigation of removing the flooring in the kitchen in here also, but we're not asking to fund that this year.
And that, that was one of the things that we cut through one of the iterative cycles is Alyssa did have some funds in there, but we felt like we couldn't justify it this particular fiscal year.
Yes. So hopefully going forward in another future budget, we can look at doing that. Another project that we've got in there is painting the foyer out here. When you move that refrigerator that's there, you will see a different color of paint behind it because there used to be a payphone there. And so just freshening up the entryway here. And then finally, we are proposing, Public Works has made us aware of these trees. There are trees planted behind the building here, and they're dealing with some widowmakers, some branches that are going to fall, and they are also just caused some issues with the roof and the gutter system. So looking at removing those and replacing them with trees that will be better fitted for back here.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Question period. Looks like Member Jordan has a question.
I'm just curious if you could, instead of like ripping out the flooring, you just put it on top.
Oh, I would have to ask Mike Brash about that. I'm not 100% sure.
That's what a lot of people do, is you just put it on top. Don't take it out. Just put it on top.
Yeah, I'd have to ask.
Thank you.
It's a good idea.
Member David, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have a question as to why was the funding source for the community center facility improvements chosen to be taken from the general fund and not the facilities fund?
The community center is certainly within the general fund. I think, so the facilities fund that we have currently, it appears to have been created to start reserving funds for a future civic center, city hall type building, which would not include a facility such as this, a community center. So while we are reserving funds for a new city hall that would house police, admin, probably the court, those type of facilities, but not necessarily a rental area for the community.
Is it an option to take the funds instead of moving them from general fund? Is it an option to choose to take facility fund dollars to fund the improvements for the community center?
I think I would like to research that and get back to you on Wednesday.
Thank you, Member David. Member Jordan, do you have another question?
I did. Okay, so to be fair, we do, how many meetings did you say? 31? We've held, like, we use this, like, one could argue we use this as our city, like, as our, not just to rent out, we use this for our meetings as we're having right now. So that was just popped into my head. It's just an argument. But then also, I was just curious how much revenue. Did you show me the pool? Do you have the page, or do you know how much revenue?
I do. James got me this information. So revenues, I'll start fiscal year 22. $28,000. Fiscal year 23, $31,000. Fiscal year 24, which is what we're living in right now, is 28,000. Is that projected?
Yes.
Yeah, projected. And then next year, we're projecting 27,000.
Are you good, Member Jordan?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay, next question, Member Bryan, please.
James, I know you have to get clarification on that question that David posed, but my question to that is, if you have a fund such as the facilities fund that's earmarked for a future city hall, if you will, how long does that fund remain there when there's no activity towards that?
Yeah, having not been here when it was created, it's kind of hard to say. And in fact, I've been talking with the auditors that we will probably transfer this fund to a special revenue fund, which is more appropriate when you're trying to save money for a building. At that point, it would be more locked into funding that building for that purpose. But as it stands now, it's an internal service fund. And so I think currently there's a little bit more wiggle room of what you can do with that money.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have another question from Member Jordan? Nope, negative. Okay. Looks like that concludes our presentation for the community center. And now we'll move on to municipal court.
And James is going to take this one.
The municipal court. This is basically handling traffic citations for the city, violations of the municipal code. Judge Jonathan Clark presides, and we have a half-time court clerk whose other half-time duties are in the accounting department. In 2023-24, there were 39 court dates. That means we held court on Wednesday afternoon 39 times in the year. Some of that's projected. There were 37 trials, and about 400 cases will be processed this year. We look to have business as usual, and then we have an ad package. Ad package number 1, part of your supplemental materials, talks about prosecuting additional misdemeanors in our municipal court. This would add 14 low-level crimes. The list is in that ad package number 1. And it's meant to help keep more offenders accountable. I'm not going to read that whole ad package, but this would change our court system a bit, and it would increase the caseload. The judge's contract would be increased by $200 a month. We would hire a prosecuting attorney, an estimate of $12,000 per year. We would hire a defense attorney and have them on contract as well. The defendant would be responsible for paying the prosecuting attorney, but we recognize that that's probably not always going to be paid, so we do estimate paying about $3,000 a year to help compensate that person if they're not paid by the defendant. And then that sergeant, so this is the idea of having a bailiff in the courtroom, which is common in courts that even don't prosecute misdemeanor criminal cases, but we felt like adding this element it'd just be a really good idea to have a bailiff in the courtroom, and so we've included that in this ad package, and that would be funded at about $8,000 a year, and that would pull an existing sergeant off their normal duties. So I do want to point that out, that this would be taking a sergeant and removing service capabilities of the police department, because we don't feel like we could hire or have a volunteer reserve person in this capacity in a required about 3 hours a week. It's not very common this day to find that person. And I also wanted to point out that we believe that the judge would be able to impose certain penalties in these cases, these new cases, one of which would be jail time. But I spoke with Marion County, and they were pretty clear that there are no beds available. If Stayton were to send any criminals their way, they would most likely be booked, essentially, fingerprinted and that sort of thing, taken, and then explain that, sorry, there's no room for you today, you're lucky, don't do it again, that sort of thing. But there's a high likelihood that no jail beds would be available for Stayton. Yeah, so that's, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. Looks like we've got a question from Member David.
Yes. I had a couple questions. First, it seems that the ad package was, one of the ad packages is the rare intern, and that was reflected in the budget that we saw, correct? That was in like the one that we're spending. And so is this ad one package that is reflected in the one that we're seeing in our 21, in the budget?
Yes.
Here?
So ad package 1 is included in the budget. So for this fiscal year, it's about $19,700 of the full year, because we're phasing this in. If it was to pass, we would need to update code, and so we estimate that September 1st would be the first time we would be giving our police the authority to to try these cases in our court. So there's a partial in this current budget, but $26,000 is our estimated full year cost, and that is hard to estimate. We're not estimating any revenues from fines from this, because not knowing how many cases would be applicable. There's also some costs that are not really counted, like the addition of my time and just some other things that are just uncertain. If there's going to be a jury trial, how do we go about doing that? And there's going to be mailings, we have to figure out how to do that and then implement it. So there's a number of things that are hard to quantify, but we've put this in to the budget for now.
I guess this would be maybe a question for Julia and potentially the chief. I know that this was a priority, and I still see it as a priority. However, I am a little concerned with the fact that we know that there are no beds available in the jails. So I'm wondering, what is the advantage of having this ability if we're going to be in a similar situation?
Chief wants to take this one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So quite frankly, there'll be far more accountability and consequence going through municipal court. So when Director Brand brought up the fact that most likely they're not going to be lodged through our municipal court on a trespass, they aren't right now. So this actually gives some opportunity for prosecution. So currently, if we arrest someone for a theft 3, they stole something at Wilco, we give them a ticket. Almost never do they go to jail. We give them a ticket, cite them into circuit court, and more times than not, it's no actioned in the interest of justice. So we're not seeing many of these cases that proceed, and so in municipal court, the option that they're going to get a consequence, there's going to be some sort of accountability, and it's going to be handled locally is actually very promising to us, and more of a consequence than what they would see now.
Great.
Here, you may have that.
Yeah. So I know that with like criminal fines and things like that, there is the ability to actually charge a significant amount more than you would in like a misdemeanor case. Are those fines able to be charged from the city? What are kind of the ranges of fines that can be charged for more criminal matters?
So there are baseline fines that are established by Oregon revised statutes, and then it is within the court's decision making on how they assess those fines. And honestly, like how that is paid and where those are distributed, I don't know per se, because I don't usually deal with that end of it. But our Oregon revised statutes set the bail schedule for misdemeanors and felony crimes.
Thank you, Chief. Questions from the other side of the table? I'm going to go with Member David first.
Thank you, Board Chair. I kind of have a question for Gwen, I think. I was curious about the bailiff. I know it's only 3 hours and everything, but does that person have to be a sworn supervisor? I'm just curious.
No, and honestly, like, as we're working through this is our kind of now plan. And part of that's based on that our patrol staff rotates shifts every 3 months. And so for some consistency in getting the court set up and finding out what our systems are with the bailiff, to me, that seemed the most realistic with providing some sort of consistency to that. Long term, I imagine we would look at that and maybe come up with a different plan. But right now, I can say that during court times on Wednesdays, more likely than not, I would have the same sergeant available. So rather than every 3 months, we look at a new staff member to throw in there. So yes, I'm with you that probably long term we would look at a different potential option, but to get us off the ground running, that would be my short-term plan. You're welcome.
Thank you. Member Luke has a question.
A few years back, I had someone decide that he didn't want to pay the tow bill and stole his car out of my yard. District attorney hasn't really done anything with it. They didn't even charge him with theft. He was charged with felon in possession of a firearm. Would that theft then go under what we're looking at doing, or?
So we would not split courts. If there was a higher level crime, those would still go to circuit court. But if we had something, any of the ones you see listed on there, as long as they didn't have a higher level crime included, which is often the case. So we deal with the thefts at our box stores. We deal with trespasses and discons where there's not a larger crime involved with it, and that would just give us a better option on how to hold them accountable and consequence.
Would this court be able to assess restitution to the victim?
Yeah, that should be something that the judge would be able to do.
Okay.
Yeah, we also anticipate possibly community service, diversion of some sort could be options as well. Not only jail and fines, but those other options.
Yeah, and muni courts often have some pretty creative ways to hold accountable, and the diversion's a pretty neat one that they may say, if in the next year you don't get in further problems, right, then we'll hold this. And so I've seen where there's been some pretty good success in changing behavior as well. And I know that Judge Clark in his other jurisdictions has had that success.
Look, we've got another question. Member Jordan.
Yes, thank you. Chief, so you mentioned that if there's a higher level crime, then it would go to, like, say, Marion County. So if Marion County chose not to prosecute, like you've said, do we then have the ability to prosecute the crime that does fit under? So if it was the theft and there was something larger and Marion County said we're not going to prosecute, are we allowed to prosecute the theft 3?
We can look at any of these crimes that are on there. It would really be case specific and dependent on why they're not prosecuting. So it would be really case specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm saving myself for the last time speaking as a member, definitely not as the chairperson here. Under highlights, the second bullet, and I don't know if Julia or Chief would like to address this. I'm bringing this up for the edification of our citizenry. I just learned about this last year, being a first-time member here on the board, that our state legislature has decided in their wisdom to take away some of our fines money. And if I'm reading this correctly, is this the second year that we are not getting fines money? Or if you could elaborate on that second bullet, please.
There has been 2 rounds of fine reductions, and the second was done in the fiscal year '24. So this program, as far as I know, is finished now, so that it should not affect the future.
Okay, good. Because if it was going to continue into the future, I would ask somebody on our city's behalf to petition the legislature in whatever means they can to go try to let us keep our fines. I mean, if they were bona fide fines, they should be coming into our coffers.
So I will say, a little bit further along when we talk about council and memberships, council authorized being a member with the Small Municipalities Advocacy Coalition, SMAC. And we did raise this issue. It's basically small cities and kind of coming together and having advocacy and a lobbyist helping at the state level. And we brought this to his attention, and he kind of reached out to the other cities, and it's on their radar now. And so we definitely will make sure that if there is legislation like this coming down the pipe, that we're paying attention to it.
Good. Thank you very much. Do we have any other cards up? Are we good with Member David? Go ahead.
This is a general question that I think is just going to apply to everything. So it's probably not necessarily specific. It's most definitely not specific to you, Chief. It's just that it has to do with the transfers. So I'm just clarifying. So like these transfers out, this is all, because this is a new line item here. There's 1,000. So this is all, where's all this money going? Is this money all going towards, actually, let me just rephrase this. The facilities fund, is that funded through these type of transfers? Or is that funded more directly through the general fund?
So, like I said before, all the transfers in match with transfers out. They're all Stayton to Stayton. There is $100,000 for the capital building fund, if that's what you mean. So that money is coming from the library. No, that was last year. Sorry. This year, it's coming from admin, police, and planning.
And that's where kind of the funding for like the what's it called? The facilities fund is coming from?
Yes, sir, and Public Works admin.
Okay, thank you.
Because they're paying for it essentially to have a home in the future, essentially.
Saving for the future, yes.
And these transfers, it's not a new line item. Every year, the transfers are identified, and it's covering things like, James's time, my time, utility. Well, yeah, not utilities.
Yeah, some of them may appear to be new because we've changed the way they're allocated. So in the past, this Capital Building Reserve Fund was funded by other departments, the library, from water, wastewater, and the street fund. In the way that I look at it, those funds don't benefit from a new city hall. So we are not transferring money from those funds anymore, but now it's coming from admin, police, planning, and public works admin, and the court.
Member Bryan, you've got a question.
Okay, James, you said the magic word came from the street fund previously. How much was that?
Last year, it was $3,200.
Is that when it started, or is that in totality?
That was just fiscal year '24.
So what was it in totality, do we know?
I'll have to get back
Okay.
to you on that.
Sounds good.
You also mentioned that some of it came out of the wastewater and sewer funds. I know those are necessary for doing streets. Can you get the totality coming out of those at that same time?
Yes. I believe this went back to 2018, so I'll just add it up from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Director James. Next on our agenda item would be administration.
Yes, governing body. So I'm going to cover this one. This is City Council. Some highlights from this current fiscal year. We continued funding for training and relationship development for the mayor and council members for, conferences. We had 3 counselors go to the League of Oregon Cities Conference in Eugene. The mayor went to the Oregon Mayors Association Conference in Hood River. So I hope that they gained some insight and knowledge through that process. And we also reintroduced the Community Improvement Grant Program that the council awarded about a month ago. We've had 2 projects completed and several others in process, and those will be done by the end of June. For 2024-25, we are proposing to allocate the $40,000 again to the Community Improvement Grant. That is certainly up to the Budget Committee and Council ultimately on whether or not they want to allocate that funding to anybody. We have an additional, some additional funds in the training program budget for goal setting. That's something that we do every 2 years, where we bring in a skilled facilitator to help with the budget or the goal setting process. And so that will be scheduled again for 2025. And then, as I mentioned, there's an increase due to membership with the Small Municipalities Advocacy Coalition. So happy to answer any questions about City Council. And this, just so you know, in your budget book under administration, it confused me a little bit when I was trying to put some pages in there. This is all kind of covered under administration, but it's 2 different slides in your meeting. Any council questions?
Member David, you've got a question.
Yeah, and, actually, I'll wait till you guys answer your questions. Yeah.
You can tell who the talkative ones are. Okay, so I was looking at the 5-year budget. Well, one, I was looking at what we have budgeted, and last year I wasn't a fan of the $40,000 for the community grant, so I would like to have a conversation when that's appropriate on decreasing that amount. While I see, because we allocated that money, I wanted to be positive about it, and I love to see what people did with it. But to Councilor Giglio's point, and why I decided to run for a second time, is that our streets need to be addressed. And so it's hard for me to say, yes, we have this money, and instead of putting it where I feel like it needs to go, we spent $40,000 other places. And that wasn't important to me. So that's number 1. And then 2, looking at the 5-year budget, without us even having this conversation, the proposed budget or the estimated budget for the next 5 years for the council fund has decreased to somewhere around $20,000. So that didn't really make a lot of sense to me.
So when we were doing the 5-year forecast, seeing what the general fund looked like, I proposed to Julia to take out the neighborhood improvement grant. She told me to leave it in there, but later on I took it out. I'm saying that in
Fair
public
enough.
right now.
Thank you.
And the rationale, and I supported for the 5-year forecast, absolutely taking it out. For it's not looking good. I proposed to keep it in this year because we just did it. We want, it's like it seemed like there was a lot of excitement. We got it out late, and I think that if we have an earlier start, we'll get even better projects. But that really is, discretionary funds for council to decide how they want to use it.
Member Jonathan, your question?
Thank you. So this is a 2-part question. First off, Julie, could you share what were the projects that were done with that neighborhood improvement grant?
Oh my goodness. Okay, you guys are going to have to help me. So one was paving a lot essentially next to the City Florence Street parking lot that will be used for farmers market. There will be some sidewalk improvements in downtown on 3rd Avenue. There will be some lighting up of trees in downtown. They haven't gotten me the specific locations. That was one of the conditions, and they're looking at it, which trees and how far out they're able to go. Some bike racks in downtown, some pet waste stations in downtown, a free little library in a neighborhood, I think out on Cathy Street, the father-daughter dance, and a cleanup of sort of a alley area off of 5th Avenue, and some fixing of some fencing, some removal of vegetation and fixing of fencing that's falling into the alley area. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Those sound like they're really good projects. And then my second question was, there's funding for SMAC, the Small Municipalities Action Coalition. How much money does council give them per year for membership?
I was afraid you were going to ask that. It's about $5,000 a year.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Member Luke, you've got a question.
Regarding the 40,000, how much of that was spent or has been allocated? All of it?
Yes, sorry. All of it has been allocated. It has not all been spent, but it has to be. We've basically made the awards contingent on they have to spend it this fiscal year because that's where it's budgeted.
Is there any way to communicate where that's being spent to the city at large? It's nice to be able to see it get done, but if it's not communicated, it kind of happens behind the scenes. And
yeah, absolutely. We were planning on, as they're getting completed, doing, including in the newsletter that goes out and the utility bills and the email that goes out, just here's what was done, some before pictures, some after pictures, so that people know what's being done.
Member David, you are up next.
Yeah, as I go through this is definitely the place that for me, and it's not that any of these things are bad. Like I agree with Councilor Ort that it was, Member Ort, that it was good. It's just that as we're prioritizing, the analogy that I think about is, there's this idea of when you need to get rocks, big rocks, little rocks, and sand into the jar, you put your big rocks in first. And I really think that streets are a big rock that need to get into our budget, and so we need to clear some things out. So in order for that, that's why I would definitely think this is definitely an area that I circle both the improvement grant, and I know that I was a big supporter of the SMAC, but I'm also willing to surrender that funding if need be. I'm also willing to cut down on some of our training budget as well. I know there's a bit of a training budget in there as well. I'm willing to really cut as much as I can in this budget because I think that of the areas, this feels more optional. Not necessarily that it's bad. I think it's good. I would also caution, I know that our finance director may not appreciate me saying this, but I definitely looked back through previous years, and future forecasts always look really dire. So I will say, I wouldn't necessarily make all of our decisions based on what those forecasts look like. And I'm not sure what he would say. I was just saying from my past experience, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of that admin.
So next is administration, which includes city manager, assistant city manager, which also is HR, all sorts of things associated with that, city recorder, and the finance department. So this year we added the community engagement coordinator, which allowed us to continue improvement in community outreach and engagement. Then we increased the newsletter. It was every other month. We increased it to monthly, increased our social media reach, did a lot more effort and outreach on our mayor contest. We did a student recognition, which was so exciting to have hundreds of people in here for really exciting and happy reasons. The finance department is fully staffed, so that's very exciting. For 24-25, we just envision continuing to build upon the community outreach, engagement, and transparency that we're currently working on. We've got a lot of really great ideas, and we're excited about that. And then, as we mentioned previously, the facilities maintenance position moved to administration, so that's more of a paper highlight than a real highlight, but wanted to note that. Any questions?
Any questions from the panel? No questions from the panel. Thank you, Julia.
Next up is general operations. That falls to me again. And this is part of the general fund where those transfers out occur. So this includes the subsidies to 3 departments. The FY25 budget has $131,000 going from the general fund to the pool, $262,000 to the parks. That's up a bit, as Julia mentioned in her opening remarks, $60,000 for a tractor, and the library fund's holding steady at $70,000 a year. Also, transfers out are for the ARPA funds for stormwater and wastewater projects, almost $1 million there. Those monies have been allocated and will be spent next year. Moving along to the streetlights. Oh, were there any?
Director, we've got.
Thanks.
Member Brian, go ahead.
Thanks, Chairman. James, what's wrong with the tractor?
Right now, there isn't a tractor. It was so far broken down. It was actually sold at the last auction we did.
Right.
So there's no tractor right now.
It was 20 years old. It was.
Yep.
Could use it.
Is that why the landscape company was mowing the grass at Neatling the other day?
I'm just about up, but.
I'd just like to know what the tractor was used for, essentially.
That tractor was the one that we were referring to that broke down over the, we've had it.
Lance, can you have it closer to you? Sorry, I know you hate that.
We would mow like Mill Creek Park with that. We'd mow Riverfront Park with that. We'd mow Wilderness Park with that. We would mow the water treatment plant with that. Just about anything but our parks. Our parks it's cheaper for us to go out and hire a contractor to mow our parks once a week and fertilize them once a month and edge once a month than it is to hire our folks to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
So streetlights has its own.
Sorry.
Oh.
I had to follow up. If that's okay, Chairman.
Go ahead, member.
Yeah, so kind of to that point then, so it seems like we've been able to exist without a tractor. Are we seeing a significant reduction in materials and services as a result of purchasing this new tractor?
I believe we only actually sold the tractor maybe a month or two ago, so it hasn't been that long. And we actually have rented one in the meantime, just so we could get these whatever we have needed done.
And I'm just going to, we've got some news about transfers coming up, but I'm not going to talk about them now because we want to keep moving along, but I'm just teasing that we have some potential good news about transfers from the pool.
Okay, there's a standalone section of the general fund for streetlights. This provides the lighting for many of the streetlights, including some signs and traffic signals. And that cost has increased over the last couple of years. We pay this directly to Pacific Power. There's just one line item there, and that cost has increased. So that's why there's an increase in that budget for this year. This is the single fund that we had to draw from the general fund contingency into the streetlight fund to help complete its funding for the current fiscal year 24. Any questions about the streetlights?
Member Luke, you've got a question.
I have two questions. First of all, I know in the past we've discussed moving to LED lights. Is that something we can look at? They're cheaper to run, they last longer.
I'm not fully aware of how many are on LEDs, but I believe some of them are, and I think that's, I've had offers from companies to come in and do it. I know that was looked at in the past, and it just didn't pencil out. There's a high upfront cost to do the conversion, and I believe that was the prior decision a few years ago.
Second question, I don't see it mentioned here, but I've heard it mentioned multiple times. We do have an opportunity for a streetlight fee. Is that something we'd want to consider?
I'll leave that to you, but yes, it's available by city.
That was a question that you guys asked last year, and we initially thought it was a potential idea when we talked with our attorney because it hadn't been charged. And this, we can remind you of this in the supplemental, just what information we had gotten from our attorney last year. Because it had been not collected for so long, and while it was in the code, he indicated it could be considered a Measure 5 limited tax. And so it's something we could potentially continue to explore, but it wasn't something that we could just take care of last year. But we'll remind you of kind of what was said, and then if you want to discuss that further, you can.
Okay, thank you, James. For streetlights, library fund.
Two questions.
Oh, sorry, didn't see
Sorry,
it.
I'll keep it as brief as
Sorry.
I can. How is that split between Pacific Power and us? I've been under the understanding that Pacific Power, once the light's up and such, okay, they will change the light and that's it. But as for the maintenance of the pole, is that on us or them? I know that's a good one to throw at you. Because the follow-up to that one is, there's been some streets where they're totally engulfed with trees, okay, and you don't see, okay, and nobody wants to take responsibility of who's cutting the trees. And one case I can just tell you, by not their fault, they're old, they don't dare go up a ladder anymore. And so they cannot, and there's no help for them. And I know for a fact, at least 10 years ago, sorry, it goes back a ways, I have seen City Works one time cut a tree to get it away from the lane. Now they don't.
So I was looking back, and it sounds like Pacific Power is responsible for the maintenance of all of the poles. So I do know that, if people make us aware of issues, we can get the word to Pacific Power, and they can schedule a work order or whatever to get something fixed.
We also have something on our website that people can call in themselves.
We also have something on our website so people can call in themselves.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Leonard. Did I see another card up?
Yeah.
Member Ben, go ahead, please.
Just along those lines, I know, so if a street light is technically operating but is real dim, let's say, and not providing adequate light, what do we do about that? I know there's a lot of streets around town that are heavily used, but if I drive down them at night, you can't see a dang thing.
That is where what Lance was talking about on our website. There's it's called like a street light outage. There's a form you can fill out on the Pacific Power site. They ask for like your the pole number and everything, and it's not necessarily that it's burned out. They'll ask you, is it dim? Is it flickering? What's it doing? And
Yeah,
they'll respond.
especially living right across from the high school. If you go up and down Locust at night, especially when there's a softball game or something going on at night, and there's cars lining the road, it is real hard to see with some of those dim lights. So that's a concern of mine personally, anyway.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Now the library fund, sorry.
Jana is up.
So some highlights for us this year include we've continued to imagine and implement new ways to provide service to the community. We've created a discovery alcove and provided a variety of open-ended STEAM projects for people of all ages to explore. We started a younger group of teen volunteers last summer and have created a monthly volunteer opportunity that we've maintained all year, really like expanding our core of what our volunteers can do and who can help us with that. We've refreshed our central space and made it where we can host larger crowds for programs and experiences. And then we've provided both a summer and a winter reading program. So some highlights for next year, we're going to continue to expand what possibilities for spaces and materials and programs. We're really excited to partner with the police department for Safety Town this summer. And we're just looking for ways to continue to increase our community partnerships. And we have excited to work on the Holiday Lights project in Community Center Park. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Member Patty, you go first.
Thank you, Board Chair. Hey, Jana, I just want to go ahead and ask a quick question about this. Just looking over the year-over-year, expenditures and things like that. I'm just kind of curious. It looks like we're decreasing a bit here on the budget. I just want to make sure you guys have all the resources you need, because I hate the idea of you guys, living frugally as much as possible out of fear or something like here. I'm just curious about that.
So we're up next May for a new levy, and I think trying not to live in fear, but trying to be really frugal and fiscally responsible. I want to make sure that we have, I'm really lucky to have an amazing crew, and my first priority is to make sure that they're secure in their jobs, right? And so you're right, I don't have any fluff. There's nothing, so we want to be thoughtful about it. I want to make sure we're lasting through the levy, and maintaining our people is my first priority. So.
And I want to note and acknowledge for Jana, because she was gracious and didn't acknowledge this herself. She is very frugal. She is very mindful. And her transfers increased. We changed the way we were allocating transfers to administration. And so she's been very frugal and responsible throughout the levy. But there's some changes. We charged the library, as we're charging all of the city facilities, water, and that was unanticipated, and then the changes in the transfers. And so I just want to acknowledge that her spending and frugality has not changed at all, but it is looking like the library fund is struggling a little bit more, but it's through zero fault of her and her planning, and I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. And Member Steve, you've got a question.
Yeah, going on board with those transfers, there's 51,800. So is that some of it going to the facilities fund, or where's all this transfer out going to?
So it's my transfer back is that number, and James is making a list, but it pays for administration on my part, right? So.
47,500 is going to the general fund for overhead.
47,500.
Oh, sorry. That one, I'm looking at the wrong column. 51,800, all to general fund overhead.
And part of the change was that, and we started this last year, but we continued to refine it this year, I believe. But rather than in the past, we allocated transfers kind of based on a percentage of the budget. For some of the admin, it's a bunch of calculations, but we charged it based on more like usage. And so there are a lot of transactions and accounts payable transactions that are dealt with. And so there is a bigger hit from finance, essentially, because of those transactions. And we need to continue looking at that, frankly. We question whether or not we have it perfectly right, but this is where we're at right now. And so we're still looking at it, but that's the rationale for the change, or that's one of the rationales for the change.
That just seems like quite a bit for overhead costs. 51,800, you're talking water and power and stuff like that, I guess,
Well,
right?
no, it's covering a portion of James, a portion of payroll, a portion of accounts payable, a portion of HR, a portion of,
Okay.
you know, so it's not, it's a portion of a lot of people and things.
Thank you, Member Steve. Member David, you've got a question?
Sorry. My bad. No, I actually just wanted to say, I really like your budget. I think that you just continue to provide a fantastic, stellar service that I really think is a highlight, one of the highlights in our community. And I think that I really appreciate the way that you are running this frugally, taking nothing for granted, and being able to just provide an outstanding continued service. So that's it.
Thank you, David, for your compliments. Member Jonathan, you've got a question.
So my question is about the capital outlay for the library. So there's the 11,200 for the HVAC unit replacement, and that seems to have been about the same for the past few years. So is that like a payment plan on a larger project, or are you just having the same amount for different projects every year?
So the library actually has 7 HVAC units that are all at the end of their lifespan. So we get to do one a year for 7 years, and that's why they're about the same.
Okay.
So we just did our one for this year, and we're down to 3. I'm past the halfway point, which is exciting.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
I want that price. Where did you get that?
Members, hope you're all having fun. This is a lot of work, a lot of numbers. How about we take like a quick little 10-minute break and get right back?
So,
We're looking to end the night.
Oh,
At 9.
Okay.
You said something about.
yeah, so I was going to just do a time check. So we talked about trying to be done by 9. We're happy to continue longer. I mean, maybe there's a chance we could get through it all tonight if we go till 10, but I don't know. I was going to say, so it sounds like we're about done with the library, and then it's pretty much the pool and then the Lance show. I've got a list of questions that you guys have been asking throughout the session, and so I don't know if you have questions that haven't been raised, and if you do, we can talk about those now, or if you kind of have raised those general questions, we can keep plugging away. It's really up to you all, and yeah, how late you want to or willing to stay. I mean, it sounds like we'll have to answer questions, so we're going to have to come back Wednesday no matter what, because we've got a lot of questions that you guys have asked. So I'll just leave it there.
Go ahead. I'm going to leave it to Member Bryan to kick in here.
So we just have the pool and then Public Works, and that's it?
That's
For the
correct.
presentations?
Correct. And facilities, but yeah.
Well, same. I'd be willing to go until 9 o'clock with those to finish that out, and then do the rest of it on Wednesday. I don't know if I want to go till 10 o'clock. I'll be dying tomorrow. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. So let's push through. We'll do the pool and then see where we'll, do you,
Sorry, I did have one pertinent question in response.
Go ahead.
My only concern would just be, I do want to make sure, to Member Sims' point, I just want to make sure we have ample time to talk about what those questions and asks would be for going into Wednesday. So as long as we're aware of that time, then I'm fine continuing to go through. I just know that we're running at about 20 minutes still.
and I could tell you what I've got right now, and then maybe, I've got, what would it look like to increase the street fee to $10 and transfer $300,000 from the general fund and do a $10 million bond for streets? I mean, that's to me what I heard, and so we need to kind of say, okay, how could we do that, and what would it look like? And then ultimately, there needs to be a decision of what you guys do and whether or not you're willing to do that. So that's kind of what I heard the question in that regard.
Yeah, that definitely covers my major question. I do think there's a few things I've identified, like that I would be willing to part with, like the top things, and I don't know if we want to have like maybe a small conversation around that to help provide some direction, or are you wanting to just kind of, you think you have enough direction to kind of to bring back something?
If you've already mentioned it, I probably have it.
Yeah, there's a couple that I haven't mentioned. The main things that I have in terms of willing to part with are, and I think that this is a changing of how we do facility funds. I'm not comfortable continuing to raise $100,000 a year for a future city hall while we don't have good streets. I think that there's two want categories, and I think streets are just more important. As much as it is good practices and the nice ideal situation, I think we have $1 million in that fund already, and I think we need to look a lot more towards maintaining a fund that can fix and maintain buildings, and not one that's going to be looking forward to a saving for a future city hall. That's one that I'm willing to part with. And then the other one, and I think that this is a last scenario, like worst case scenario, and I'm just, I think that if you're able to find, some money elsewhere, that's okay. But I'm willing to part with 1 FTE from administration as well. And yeah, I think we know who that is. So I don't want to necessarily, I'm not exactly sure if I can say what that is in this conversation. I'm just saying if you're looking at, if there's one FTE from not from administration, I would be willing to cut. For example, yeah, I don't know how we want to have that specific conversation or how that works, but
Yeah, so what we would need to do is look at kind of all of these things, and that's, that's helpful to explore what that would look like. And certainly I want to look at the facilities fund, how it was established, if there are any, like what that would even do if we got rid of the facilities fund, in terms of giving back or pausing the facilities fund. So we need to do a little bit of work on that end. Can we push through the pool? Okay.
Yeah, if it's okay, why don't we go ahead and push through to our last couple of presentations, the pool and the parks.
Yes. All right. So I am going to talk to you guys about the pool tonight. Some highlights from the current fiscal year. We've served approximately 4,800 drop-in patrons and have had 654 new memberships. Revenue has remained a little lower than projected and needed. However, there's cost savings and capital outlay that are helping offset the lower revenues this year. We continue to have a partnership with ProMotion Physical Therapy. They use the pool for patients with mobility issues. Last year, or I guess this current fiscal year, we did through the budget process, the FTE count was increased to allow for additional swim lesson offerings, and we are offering the swim lessons just started up this month, and they sell out super quick. And now that we have kids that are lifeguards that are out of college and starting to come back, they are able to work more hours, and so that's why we can get the swim lessons going again. The Kiwanis Club continues to provide funding for water safety lessons for third graders in the area. They pay for them to be bussed in. They get swim lessons at the pool and then taken back to their school. Spring break, we hosted special open swim sessions, brought in more than 80 families each day. We were able to have the slide open on those days, and that's a huge draw to the pool when the slide's open. It's always a disappointment when people get there and we don't have the slide open for open swim, but it does take an actual employee has to be at the top of the slide monitoring it, and so it takes extra people. And then this isn't on the slide, but I wanted to add that we also are the home of practices and swim meets for local swim teams. We've got Cascade and Stayton High School who use the pool during the swim team season, and then the Manta Rays are utilizing the pool year round. They rent, and so all of those organizations are renting the pool from the city in the evenings for their swim team practices. And so this next fiscal year, we did increase the rates 5%. across the board for all things. And we're also working with the swim teams. Those are a separate contract, and so we're working with those groups to increase what their rent that they're paying for the pool also. Again, we're continuing marketing and outreach to bring patrons and new members in. I've been working with Christian, the community engagement coordinator, to really help us get the word out about the pool and swim lessons and just what's available that we're offering. Next, I'm going to talk about the capital outlay, and Julia's been teasing this a little. So in the capital outlay this year, we're proposing to do a replacement of a water heater, replacing the electrical panel, which is the original one from the building. A big reason for the electrical panel is if anything electrical happens at the pool, we'll have to replace it. Like, electricians have told us they will not work on that. It's out of code and it needs to be replaced. Rebuilding a pool pump, and then the room essentially in the building where the slide was not painted when they painted the rest of the interior of the building. So we've got paint peeling on the walls and it just doesn't look great. So the good news is, in this budget that's in front of you, you are seeing this money coming out, basically going to be covered by a subsidy from a transfer from the general fund. A couple weeks ago, I met with a representative from the pool endowment. So for those that don't know, the pool has, the reason the pool is covered the way it is now, there was a woman who grew up in Stayton. She frequented the pool. When she passed away, she was living up in the Seattle area, and she left money to the city to cover the pool. And so funds were used back in the 90s to cover the pool, and that's why we have an indoor pool now. Well, there's still money in this fund, and so I met with them a couple weeks ago, and we actually have a meeting, because Julia and James weren't around that day, with him tomorrow, but they have offered to pay for all these capital projects. So it's like about $34,500. They've said they will give us the money to do those. Also not mentioned on this slide that I want to talk about is a pool facility audit that is part of the council goals of figuring out what we're going to do with this pool long term. And so there is $20,000 in here for a pool audit to look at the infrastructure of the pool, the pipes, which are encased in concrete, and just letting us know, what is the state of the pool? What should we, if we were to leave the pool open long term, what should we be focusing on? Where are we going to get our most bang for the buck to make sure that this facility lasts long term? Or is it a lost cause? We don't know. So unfortunately, that piece the endowment can't cover, but they are willing to cover all our other capital projects for next year. And with that, I think that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Member Jonathan?
So this is, thank you. This is more of an observation that I have. Looking at the library and the parks, when there's a section in there for grants and contributions, but for the pool, I'm not seeing one. Those are the three funds that receive the annual subsidies from the general fund. So has anybody ever looked into grants for the pool, because it is so apparently underfunded chronically?
So we talk about it. I know there's some AARP grants that we have thought about applying for. They're very program specific, so it's not going to necessarily fund capital. So that certainly it's on our mind, and but it's a little challenging. I will also say, I don't know if people realize that we also it's not a grant, but we bill insurance, so that's something that helps us, provide a service for our members. So we're getting funds through that way as well.
Thank you.
Member Jordan?
Thank you. To your point about I was looking, so there's $23,000 that the library gets from the library fund and probably Friends of the Library. The pool had a Friends of the Library, and I would really love to see, when we were talking about the levy and whether, trying to get that passed, there were a lot of people that said that they would do anything to have the pool reopen. And so I'd really love to see probably our community engagement coordinator get that group going again for the Friends of the Library, because it's probably an issue of who's going to run it and get everything going.
So it's the Friends of the Pool.
Okay.
It's separate from the libraries
Well,
group.
I know,
okay.
but I'm saying,
I just wanted to make that.
I want something like,
Yes.
I want them
So
to come back and bring money, because if we could get $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 from the community. You said that we have 3 swimming organizations. They probably don't want to see the pool go away. So how do we leverage that?
The
How do we
Friends
leverage
of the
these
Pool
people?
is a nonprofit group, and so they are still there. They exist. I think since COVID, since the last levy election, a lot of them have moved.
Okay.
And so, but the main, the president, I guess you could say, of it, Jack Burnett, is still around and active. And so I think in talking with Emily, he's very much involved. They helped partially fund through, also the swim teams helped replace all the diving blocks last
Okay, I
year
remember you mentioned that.
at the pool. And so they're around. I don't know what their funding looks like right now, because they haven't really been active. Like, they used to do spaghetti feeds and other events, and I don't think that they've actively been really doing anything. But we will definitely, we've already been internally having discussions about the levies, and we need the grassroots effort of the people to help, because as staff and the city, we can't advocate for levies, and so it really is important to have those groups participate.
Well, I'd be interested to see what the conversation with the Friends of the Pool, excuse me, Friends of the Pool, and then the swimming organizations or people who go to the pool. If we said we cannot continue, we have a line item for the pool on our general fund, but we don't have a line item for our streets. And the pool is really important to me, but so are the streets. So I feel like that should be, that's part of what you're saying, Steve. And so if we say we're not going to continue to fund this at this rate, how can you help out? I feel like that's feet to the fire, saying what are you going to do to make sure that this is a place you can continue to use?
Yeah, and I feel good about, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the people coming, we reopened in 2021, and it was a slow start, as you can see, and it is growing. We are getting more people in the door, and I feel like if we can keep the momentum going and we can get the word out, get more marketing out there, we're going to get more people in. As you know, the hardest part is we need adults who can work during the day, and that is really hard. And so the adults that we do have are usually college students so they're gone during the school year, and they're back spring break, winter break, and then summer break, which is why we can offer so much during the summer, and then they're off back to college. And so I feel like we're on a good trajectory. We've got a really great staff over there, and it's just continuing to work and to rally the people back that love the pool, because like you said, they loved the pool, and it was all about that. And so it's just, I think Jack with the Friends of the Pool, really reaching out and connecting with some of those people to get them involved again.
We've got another question. Member David.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize what Member Ort was saying. I do think that there may be some space here to put a little proverbial feet to the fire through incentivizing, saying, hey, we're going to start reducing some of these subsidies, and that's going to mean that you need to reactivate Friends of the Pool. There needs to be some other additional funding sources and thinking. And so that's just from a city budget perspective. I just wanted to underline that I'm in agreement with what Member Ort was saying.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your presentation. Parks Fund is next on the agenda. Mr. Lance.
Thank you, Damien. This year is a little different for Public Works. As you know, in the past, I'm usually up here for about 3 hours, it seems like, going through all the funds. We're trying to shorten it this year, so I ask you to look at your budget documents that we prepared for you. If you have any questions regarding the budget documents as I go along, please share with me your questions. What I'm going to focus on are accomplishments from last year and this year. And when I'm done with that specific fund, if you have any questions regarding the budget itself, please share them with me and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So tonight we'll start off with the Parks Fund. In 2023-24, we replaced the roof on the barn at the Mill Creek Park. We'll be using that for storage and so forth. The police force uses it also for storage. We will be incorporating that into the Mill Creek Park plan. We also planted trees at Neatling Park and Pioneer Park recently. I think Councilor Sims was out there. He'd see some of that. We installed wood chips throughout all our parks. We created 2 pickleball courts at the community center. We cleared brush from the south of the water treatment plant. We'll be continuing to do that. We updated the Mill Creek Park master plan. We applied for an OPRD large grant. I'm currently answering more questions from the OPRD regarding that grant. I'll be resubmitting those tomorrow. And we also purchased a new maintenance truck via our enterprise contract that James Brand put together for us. And so for the 24-25 highlights, we're going to be continuing with the Riverfront Park cleanup south of the water treatment plant. We will hopefully be putting a new parking lot in there and constructing a kayak ramp for visitors to our city. We're going to be removing several trees in our parks that are hazard trees, quite frankly. They need to be taken down. They're a liability issue, so we budgeted some money for that. We'll continue with just maintenance, engineered wood chips in our parks to try to keep our parks usable year-round versus just in the summertime. Sandy Am Park, we have the rubber matting. I've been reached out to by several counselors as well as community members regarding the bouncy park.
I got a picture.
You got a picture, very nice. The issue that we have, and we're now getting to the point where we can get in there and actually fix it ourselves, it's a temperature thing. You have to have a certain temperature before you can go in and install the rubber. We have all the materials ourselves, but it's only been a week. I mean, you all know what it's been for the last 3 weeks. It's just been drizzle. So we're looking forward to fixing that in the coming weeks, coming month. And the Parks Board has been working hard on Mill Creek Park. They've completed their half-mile length track around the park. Someone came in and actually planted some trees out there, unbeknownst to me, but they look nice. Yeah, look very nice out there. And you know, a topic of conversation we had earlier is replacing a tractor. We don't go out and try to buy things. I just want to make this point clear. We're not out there to waste citizens' taxpayer money. This is a tractor that we've had for 20 years, and our guys work hard on it. They maintain it. 20 years it's been, and we finally had to replace it. We actually got $5,000, I think, on the sale. So that $5,000 is going towards the new tractor. I want that point known because we take good care of our equipment, our machinery. 20 years for a tractor is a long time, and we used it throughout. I just want you guys to know that we're not out frivolously spending your money. And with that, I'll answer any questions you have regarding the parks.
Member Leonard?
I guess I got you. First of all, the pictures weren't a slam. It was like, I wanted to go see it for myself, just how bad it was. You're right, no problem. Not arguing with you. In regards to the tractor, 60,000, like, have you looked at a tractor that's 65,000 and you're wanting to just ask for 60,000? Because you just mentioned the sale of the old tractor.
No, what we've done is we went out probably 3-4 months ago. We knew this tractor was dying. We went out and looked at John Deere tractors. John Deere's tractors are more expensive. We're looking at Kubota tractor. It's less expensive.
Yes.
We get more attachments so we can do more things in our parks. So we're going to go actually tomorrow. My supervisor and the parks operator is going to go out and actually go on site and look at it and see exactly. But the budget amount was 60,000. It may come in less than that.
Okay, just another question, just not to be overly frugal, it's understandable if you get all new equipment, it'd be under a certain amount of warranty and such like that. Was there any auctions or anything happening where there was a tractor that was only maybe 2 years old
To be
and had everything you needed?
To be completely honest, no, it didn't look.
Member Jordan, you're up.
Yes, so for the tractor, does it all have to come out of the general fund? Or we have, what's a $61,000 of unappropriated, and I don't pretend to know what that's for, but so the question I have is, does it all have to come out of the general fund?
Well, the parks are actually funded via the general fund and the levy.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily all coming out of the general fund, but let's assume it is. That's the only place we get our money from. So I don't know where else it would come from.
Sure, I'm just saying, do we have any in reserves that we can use?
I will turn that over to Mr. Brandt.
It's going to be general fund reserves.
Yeah, so we have a contingency of 72,000, and then the unappropriated amount, I believe, is the working capital reserve. So, yeah, we looked at that. I think we're down to within $1,000.
Okay, thank you, Lance, for the parks part.
All right, moving on to streets. I know no one's really.
Doing a time check. How are we, what are you guys wanting to do?
I would wrap it up. That's this meeting.
Yeah, I would like to maybe just make sure everybody has their questions.
Three guys with sore backs standing there.
Yeah.
We're going to be back here Wednesday anyway.
So, what I would propose, if this is okay, is maybe each person go around and ask any questions that they have that you want us to follow up with you on for Wednesday. David Patty is looking like maybe that's not a good idea.
I just want to be mindful of staff's time and everybody's time here, and if that takes a lot longer, I don't know. I'm just a little worried. Maybe we could get those by email to staff
would be
too?
fine. Yeah, that would be great if you guys could get us questions that you have by honestly 10 o'clock tomorrow morning or tonight when you get home. That way I've blocked out all day tomorrow to work on following up for you guys. That would be ideal.
If we've got stuff that's more related to some of the stuff we see on these 5-year projections, should I save that until later?
You can certainly ask the question. Send an email, and we can make sure that we're doing a memo. What we did last year, and I think it worked really well, is that we tried to address all of the questions via a memo that we get out to you, ideally tomorrow afternoon. We'll see. At the very least, Wednesday afternoon, so that you have something to look at before the meeting on Wednesday. So, yeah.
Okay, if the members are in agreement, we will hold off on the street fund and the other questions until Wednesday and adjourn this meeting, night one, tonight. Thank you.